Chapter 733. Of course. Before Lin Yi could reply, Flawless White smiled and said, I'll be fine by myself during this period of time. That's good. Bring Lin Yi and Qin Yue to the inner yard tomorrow. We'll use the teleportation channel to leave. Theta Scarabii nodded slightly and reminded him before turning to leave. Looking at Theta Scarabii's departing figure, Flawless White said in a low voice, Little guy, let me give you a piece of advice. It's best not to have close ties with any faction, including me. Especially after you arrive at the inner yard. You must remain neutral. Is the conflict between factions that serious? Hearing this, Lin Yi frowned slightly and looked at Flawless White in confusion. Based on the people he had interacted with so far, Cebu Gakuen was rather united. He did not understand why Flawless White and the rest would have such a conflict between factions. Sigh, you definitely can't imagine how serious the conflict between factions is. Therefore, I hope you can remain neutral. Flawless White sighed and said, If it weren't for my identity, I would also want to remain neutral. However, it's no longer possible. Fortunately, the new students these years are not bad. If possible, you should strive to unite all the students. I have a premonition that the key to changing the conflict between factions lies with this batch of new students. As Flawless White spoke, he stared at Lin Yi, which surprised Lin Yi. Shrugging his shoulders, Lin Yi said softly, Elder, don't worry. I have a good impression of the other students. Alright, it's time for me to send you back. Flawless White sighed and said, In this trip to the Five Spirits God ruins, there are many great sage invincible. Dangers lurk everywhere in the ruins. You must protect yourself well. Ha, don't worry, Elder. I'll definitely get the Five Spirits God technique back. The corner of Lin Ye's mouth curled up. He was rather confident. Then I shall wait and see. Flawless White laughed softly. With a thought, he brought Lin Yi and hurried towards the outer courtyard. Not long after, Lin Yi had already returned to his residence. At this time, Silent Soul and Sun Wuyu weren't there. Lin Yi was sitting in the hall, waiting for them to return. The journey to the Five Spirits God relics would take at least a month or even longer. Lin Yi had to arrange everything properly. Not long after, Silent Soul and Sun Wuyu returned, their faces filled with excitement. Captain Gongzi, we met Elder Bai just now. He told us that we were also recruited by Cebu Gakuen. He even rewarded us with 5 million points. Without waiting for Lin Yi to ask, Silent Soul and Sun Wuyu shouted excitedly, which surprised Lin Yi. Thinking about it, Lin Yi understood that this should be a reward from Flawless White. This time, Lin Ye's contribution was not small. He had discovered a pocket dimension. Not to mention other things, just the information about the demons was worth these rewards. Even if they had no way to confirm it, the Honorable Lord and the others were already on guard. It was almost impossible for them to be cheated. In addition, the new cultivation system was comprehended by Lin Yi himself and contributed to the academy. Naturally, the academy would reward him. 5 million points per person, and an exception was made for admission. These rewards might not be enough to measure Lin Ye's contribution. However, Lin Yi was very satisfied. This is a good thing. Since you are already considered students, if you have time, go to the Heart Refining Abyss and Heavenly Thunder Realm. It will be good for your cultivation. Don't spend those points on the Sky Rapier Gate. Go to the Sacred Pavilion and exchange for some good treasures. Lin Yi reminded them, if you have time, go to the Pill Pavilion. If you have a mission, go to Luori City. Xue Feng and the others are in Luori City. You must keep in touch. If they lack any resources, don't be stingy with your points. Go to the Sacred Pavilion and exchange for them. After reminding them, Silent Soul and Sun Wuyu patted their chests and promised to complete the mission. Silent Soul pursed his lips and asked, Gongzi, are you going out again? That's right. Lin Yi sighed. I might not be back for a month. During this time, I'll leave the Sky Rapier Gate to you guys. Okay, Silent Soul and Sun Wuyu looked at each other and hesitated for a moment. In the end, they agreed with a sigh. Although they wanted to go out with Lin Yi, they knew that they were too weak. If they followed Lin Yi, they would only be a burden. Moreover, the development of the Sky Rapier Gate needed them. After reminding them for a while, Lin Yi went back to his room and started cultivating in the Universe Pagoda and Ninefold Space. He had only merged 300 types of sacred glyphs and had not reached the bottleneck. He just did not have enough time. He still had one night to cultivate. He wanted to merge more sacred glyphs before the 5 spirits God relic opened. Biluo knew that Lin Yi was in a hurry, so she used the origin water to speed up Lin Yi's merging. However, the divine land was different from the 9 states. This time, Lin Yi had only merged 999 types of sacred glyphs and reached the bottleneck. He could not merge anymore. Hiss. My physical body is still too weak. I can still bear the divine telekinesis, but my physique has reached the peak. I can't strengthen it anymore. Phew, it seems that with a physical body, even if I use the divine telekinesis, there is still a limit. After understanding this, Lin Yi was curious. He did not know if the upper limit of merging with physique or divine telekinesis was higher. Since he could no longer merge the sacred glyphs, Lin Yi started cultivating his saint power. If he wanted to break through to level 60 divine telekinesis saint, he would need a great opportunity. It was difficult to make progress just by cultivating. Only martial arts could be considered Lin Yi's weak point at the moment. After 4 months, Lin Yi ended his cultivation, but there was not much improvement. As expected, after becoming an invincible saint, it will be difficult to break through. Lin Yi sighed and packed his things. After reminding Silent Soul for a while, he left the courtyard. At this time, Flawless White and Qin Yu were already waiting at the door. After looking at each other, Flawless White raised his hand and led Lin Yi and Qin Yu to the inner courtyard. After taking a look at Qin Yu, Lin Yi found that her aura had solidified, and even her martial arts realm had improved. He could not help but nod. It seemed that they had improved a lot in this trip to Sky Market. Not long after, Lin Yi, Qin Yu, and Flawless White landed outside a teleportation circle. "Greetings, Elder." A greeting was heard. Lin Yi and Qin Yu looked up and saw dozens of figures standing at the side, bowing to Flawless White. Shen Qinyun, Feng Toyoi, and the others were among them. However, other than Shen Qinyun, who was standing in the first row, Toyota E and several of his underlings stood at the back. Theta Scarabii stood at the front. When she saw Flawless White and the others, she nodded slightly and gestured for Lin Yi and Qin Yu to walk over. End of chapter. Chapter 734. After Flawless White left, Lin Yi and Qin Yu also came to Theta Scarabii. For a moment, many inner yard disciples, except for Shen Qinyun, Feng Tianyi, and a few others, looked at Lin Yi and Qin Yu strangely. "Not bad, your divine senses have reached level 60, and your martial realms have also improved. You have met the qualifications to participate." After sizing up Lin Yi and Qin Yu, Theta Scarabii smiled. "Alright, hurry up and get into position. We'll open the transportation channel immediately." Amidst Theta Scarabii's laughter, Lin Yi and Qin Yu walked into the crowd. Many inner yard disciples were surprised and suspicious. They didn't understand why Lin Yi and Qin Yu could join the team of the 5 spiritual god relics when they weren't even at the Great Sage Realm. In the inner yard selection, many pinnacle Great Sage Realm cultivators weren't qualified. However, very quickly, when they saw Shen Qinyun greeting Lin Yi with a smile and chatting with him, they were all stunned on the spot. "Hiss! This guy knows the little witch? Looks like his identity is not ordinary, not simple at all." At this moment, many disciples looked at each other and didn't dare to underestimate Lin Yi anymore. Noticing this, Theta Scarabii shook her head slightly. She hadn't opened the formation yet and was still waiting. Lin Yi wasn't in a hurry. he chatted with Shen Qingyun while sizing up the surrounding disciples. This time, there were a total of more than 20 people who could explore the 5 spiritual god relic. Among them, there was a familiar face, Yuan Mo. Lin Yi was surprised. After sensing carefully, he realized that Yuan Mo's true realm was actually at the pinnacle Great Sage realm. Noticing Lin Yi's gaze, Yuan Mo nodded slightly at Lin Yi and smiled. Lin Yi smiled back, but he was shocked. Yuan Mo's clone had been defeated by him. He originally thought that the first meeting between the two of them would be filled with tension. He didn't expect Yuan Mo to be so friendly. However, Lin Yi didn't think too much about it and looked at the rest of the people again. It was undeniable that Cebu Gakuin had attached great importance to the 5 spirits god relic. Among the 20 or so people, except for Lin Yi, Toyota E, and a few others, almost all of them were geniuses who cultivated both saint energy and divine sense. Moreover, the lowest level among them was the peak Great Sage, and there were 2 invincible saints. This caused Lin Yi to be extremely shocked. Last time, some of the palace masters that he had seen had yet to arrive, and there were already 2 invincible saints. Just how many experts were there in the inner court? Originally, Lin Yi didn't attach much importance to the inner court and thought that he would be able to rank amongst the top once he entered the inner court. But now, he realized that he was wrong. In the inner court, there were definitely many disciples who could defeat him. Just among the 20 or so people, there were a few who made him feel fear. A moment later, another figure walked over from afar, yawning. Everyone became curious when they noticed this. They raised their heads and looked over, only to see a young man in black clothes slowly walking over. His expression was rather indifferent. Yi-in. When they saw the young man's appearance clearly, Lin Yi and Qin Yu were both surprised. Didn't they say that apart from the few of them, the rest were only inner court disciples? Why was Yi-in also able to come? Elder, when are we leaving? Yi-in came in front of the crowd and ignored everyone's surprise. He only glanced at Theta Scarabii. Kid, are you really going? Theta Scarabii narrowed his eyes and said, The 5 spirits god relic is full of danger. With your current strength, it's very likely that you'll be injured and die. So what? Yi-in yawned and said snappily, All right, since everyone is here, let's go. Yes, you only need to remember that I won't care about you this time. Slightly nodding his head, Theta Scarabii did not pay attention to Yi-in's words. He waved his right hand and in an instant, a screen of light had already enveloped everyone present. Lin Yi, Shen Qingyun and the rest had yet to recover from the shock in their hearts when their vision turned black and they fainted. Before their consciousness gradually dissipated, there was a question in almost everyone's hearts: who exactly was that young man, to actually dare to speak to Theta Scarabii in such a manner? After what seemed like an eternity, yet also like an instant, light gradually appeared. Lin Yi slowly opened his eyes as a fragrant smell immediately assaulted his senses. Buzz. When he smelled the fragrance, Lin Yi immediately felt that his body was filled with incomparable energy. His head shook as he completely woke up. Raising his eyes, Lin Yi was stunned. His surroundings were filled with verdant trees and colorful flowers. It was as if he was in a paradise on earth. Theta Scarabii's sleeves fluttered in the wind as she stood not far away like an immortal. Looking around, the rest of the students woke up one by one. When they saw this scene, they were all shocked. Behind the crowd, there was a spatial crack that rippled with a strong spatial aura. However, very quickly, the spatial crack closed and only the crowd was left. Many of the students were curious. However, Theta Scarabii only had her back facing them and did not speak, nor did they dare to go forward and ask. Only Yi-in curled his lips and asked, Where is this place? Are we just going to wait here? This is the desolate god region, it does not belong to the 4 major regions. Theta Scarabii's voice rang out. Xuanji has already arrived a month in advance. Wait for her to come and pick you up. Also, after Xuanji arrives, I will no longer care about you. Until the 5 Spirit God ruins opens, you are free to move around. However, I suggest that you move in groups. Otherwise, you may be at a disadvantage here. Those who can come here are not easy to deal with. As soon as she finished speaking, many of the students were not convinced. Which one of them was not a genius in Cebu Gakuin? They would not admit defeat if they were asked to. Lin Yi was surprised. He did not expect the desolate God region to exist in addition to the 4 major regions. Buzz. A surging sage aura rippled as a figure flashed in a dazzling light and sped over from afar. As she got closer, countless jade butterflies appeared and floated in the air. Seeing the jade butterflies, many of the students smiled. Senior Xuanji is here. Hee, with Senior Xuanji here, this trip to the 5 Spirit God ruins is in the bag. Many of the students grinned as they looked at the figure approaching from afar. Their eyes were filled with respect and admiration. Fairy Xuanji was the #1 genius in Cebu Gakuin and the #1 beauty in the academy. She was admired by many. Soon, the dazzling light dissipated and the jade butterflies turned into a cool aura that floated in the air. A beautiful figure descended and stood in front of Dao Yi. Her appearance was devastatingly beautiful. It was Fairy Xuanji. Xuanji greets Elder. After bowing slightly, Fairy Xuanji glanced at the people behind Theta Scarabii. Her expression did not change at all. I'll leave these little guys to you. Theta Scarabii nodded and clasped his hands together. In the next moment, his body turned into an illusion and disappeared in front of everyone. End of chapter. Chapter 735. Everyone, welcome to the desolate God realm. Fairy Xuanji said calmly. Elder Theta Scarabii should have told you that you can choose to move around freely or follow me. Make your own choice. Of course we'll follow Fairy Xuanji. Ha ha ha. Fairy Xuanji, you're one of the top 10 geniuses in the universe. I feel safer following you. Many students cheered and giggled as they approached Fairy Xuanji. Yi Yin was the only one left. He coldly glanced at the crowd and walked into the distance. Sensing this, Lin Yi and Qin Yu couldn't help but be surprised. Why is this guy so unconventional? Lin Yi whispered with a frown. I'm not sure. He's very strange. He's alone in the sky market world and even targets his own people. Qin Yu shook her head and said, but he's very strong. He's in the top 5 of the sky market list all by himself. If the time wasn't up, I'm afraid he'd be in the top 3. Forget it. Since he's alone, let's not bother about him. Lin Yi and Qin Yu looked at each other and decided to stick together. After all, this was a new area and they had never been here before. It would save them a lot of trouble if someone showed them around. It's boring to stick together. Shin Qinyun stuck out her tongue and suddenly said, Lin Yi, I know the general situation here. Let's go out alone. There aren't many experts in this area. What we need to be careful of are the sect disciples from the other 4 major regions. Lin Ye's mouth twitched as he looked at Shin Qinyun. Qin Yu also had a strange look on her face. Sister Xuanji is actually very strict. It's boring to be with her. Shin Qinyun stuck out her tongue and looked at Lin Yi with her big watery eyes. Junior brother Lin, let's go alone. Anyway, there's still some time before the real relic opens. The helpless Lin Yi was just about to reply when he suddenly felt a burst of cold air, and his whole body trembled. Looking up, Lin Yi suddenly realized that Fairy Xuanji had already arrived in front of him and Shin Qinyun. Cough cough. Lin Yi couldn't help but feel extremely awkward. Although he wasn't the one bad-mouthing Xuanji, Shin Qinyun was talking to him, and he couldn't get away with it. The rest of the students looked surprised. Their eyes kept drifting back and forth between Lin Yi and Shin Qinyun. They could see that the relationship between Shin Qinyun and Lin Yi was very different. Shin Qinyun was the witch of the inner courtyard. She was very famous and everyone knew her character. Now, seeing Shin Qinyun being so cute in front of Lin Yi, they were all very surprised. Sister Xuanji. Shin Qingyun stuck out her tongue and called out sweetly. I don't object to you going out alone, but you're not allowed to cause trouble. Xuanji glanced at Lin Yi, then looked at Shin Qingyun and said in a low voice, "The Five Spirits God relic is very important, and people from the other three forces will be here. Try not to cause trouble and expose your identity." "Okay, Sister Xuanji." In front of Fairy Xuanji, Shin Qingyun was like an obedient child and nodded vigorously. This scene caused Lin Yi and Qingyue to be dumbstruck. They had never seen Shin Qingyun being so obedient. Even in front of Lin Yi, she just restrained herself a little. It seems that Fairy Xuanji's status in the inner courtyard is very high. Lin Ye's evaluation of Fairy Xuanji rose again. "If something really happens, call me directly." Nodding at Shin Qingyun, Xuanji did not speak to Lin Yi and Qingyue. Instead, she turned to look at the rest and asked in a low voice, "Is there anyone else who wants to go out alone?" As soon as he finished speaking, many of the students looked at each other, and a few of them left silently. After making sure that no one left, Fairy Xuanji led the crowd away. In an instant, only Shin Qingyun, Lin Yi, and Qingyue were left. Glancing at Qingyue, she saw that Shin Qingyun's lips were puffed up, as if she was panting with anger. Cough cough. Should I leave? Qingyue glanced at Lin Yi and laughed softly. "It's okay, it's more fun with three people." Shin Qingyun rolled her eyes and laughed softly. "This should be the first time the two of you are meeting Sister Xuanji, right? She's the #1 fairy of Cebu Gakuen. She's extremely powerful and resourceful." "Hee, isn't she powerful? Seems like you're very close to her." Lin Yi raised his eyebrows and smiled. "I've seen her power before. She's very powerful." "Oh, you've actually met Sister Xuanji?" Shin Qingyun pouted. "Of course I'm close to her. Looking at her, it seems like she's in danger this time. But with the three of us, it shouldn't be a problem. The Desolate God territory doesn't belong to the 4 main territories, but in reality, the 4 main territories can crush it. The forces here are not as powerful as the 4 main territories. What we have to be careful of is the people from the other 4 main territories. By the way, do you know the other 4 forces?" Lin Yi shrugged. "Who doesn't know?" Shin Qingyun smiled. "Other than Geo Dragon School, Holy Moon Divine Sect, and Divine Sky Sect, we don't have to be afraid of the other forces. We don't have to worry even if we have to face those 3 sections. With Sister Xuanji around, unless they call us elders, they won't dare to do anything." "What's Fairy Xuanji's rank among the top 10 geniuses in the starry sky?" Lin Yi chuckled. "Are the people from the other forces that afraid of her?" "Yes, Sister Xuanji's ability is very special. Even those who are ranked higher than her don't dare to do anything rashly." Shin Qingyun smiled. "I won't say exactly how powerful she is. You'll know in the future. Well, we should go to Dahuang City. It's very interesting here. Especially the Beast Fighting Coliseum. Strange beasts will appear from time to time." Dahuang City, Beast Fighting Coliseum. Lin Yi smiled bitterly. "My little ancestor, even if you want to go, shouldn't you introduce this place to us?" Ha ha ha. Sticking out her tongue, Shin Qingyun introduced the Desolate God territory to them while skipping towards the southwest. There were a total of 6 cities in the Desolate God territory. They were neither big nor small. As for Dahuang City, it was a city close to the Divine Land. It was said that a holy sage had fallen here and left behind his relic. Therefore, it was very popular. People often came here to try their luck, hoping to find the holy sage's relic. There were a total of 4 replicated relics of the 5 spiritual gods. After they were cleared, the original relics would appear in the Desolate God territory within a month. However, no one knew where the 5 spiritual gods' relics would appear. Therefore, Fairy Xuanji had asked many times if they could split up and asked Shin Qingyun and Lin Yi to go together. The more people split up, the higher the possibility of them finding the 5 spiritual gods' relics first. They would have the upper hand. End of chapter. Chapter 736. The Great Desolation City was located in the north of the desolate God realm. When Shen Qingyun arrived with Lin Yi and Qin Yu, the Great Desolation City was full of people. Countless people were entering and exiting the city. It was extremely lively. Hee, let's go to the Beast Fighting Coliseum first. After arriving at the Great Desolation City, Shen Qingyun's eyes lit up. Like a bird that had struggled out of its cage, she dragged Lin Yi and rushed towards the Great Desolation City. Looking at the backs of Lin Yi and Shen Qingyun, Qin Yu rubbed her nose and felt extremely depressed. Originally, she only wanted to be familiar with Lin Yi. In addition, Shen Qingyun's strength was not bad, so it would be much safer to be with them. However, she never expected that it would be so painful to be with the two of them. It was fine to be ignored all the time, but they would not think of her at all. Phew, I might as well go alone. With a sigh, Qin Yu could only helplessly catch up and slowly follow behind Lin Yi and Shen Qingyun. Of course, Lin Yi was not just fooling around. Although Shen Qingyun dragged him all the way out, Lin Yi roughly analyzed the strength of the people on the street in the Great Desolation City. In the Great Desolation City, the strength was generally between the half-sage and the sage. The Great Sage was very rare. In terms of strength, it was about the same as the Sunset City. Could not be compared with the four major domains. Realizing this, Lin Yi breathed a sigh of relief. He did not have to worry about Shen Qingyun's safety. The facilities in the city were similar to those in other cities. Lin Yi was led to a rather luxurious building after Shen Qingyun turned left and right. Obviously, Shen Qingyun had been here before, and she had been here many times. At the luxurious entrance, several guards saw Lin Yi and Shen Qingyun arrive. They all smiled and went forward to welcome them. His friendly attitude surprised Lin Yi. Shen Qingyun did not pay attention to the guards. She pulled Lin Yi and prepared to rush in, but was stopped by Lin Yi. "Senior sister, you seem to have forgotten about someone." Lin Yi stared at Shen Qingyun silently. Only then did he remember that he had been following Shen Qingyun and had almost forgotten about Qin Yue. With a soft cry, Shen Qingyun turned around and saw Qin Yu walking over leisurely. Only then did she let out a sigh of relief. She stuck out her tongue and said, "I didn't notice her. This junior martial sister doesn't seem to like talking much." The corners of Lin Ye's mouth twitched when he heard this. "If you want to talk, then you have to find an opportunity to talk." The guards were ignored by Lin Yi and by Yunfei. Smiles still hung on their faces as they waited on the side. Not long later, Qin Yu arrived. When she saw Lin Yi and Shen Qingyun looking at her, she couldn't help but blush. She asked softly, "Why are you looking at me? Could it be that you think I'm too annoying and want to spend some alone time?" "No." Shen Qingyun clenched her fist and said, "Who wants to spend some alone time with him? Junior sister, let's go in and fight the beast." The corners of his mouth twitched. Lin Yi could only watch as Shen Qingyun pulled Qin Yu into the building. "Young master, please." The guards extended their hands and smiled. Lin Yi responded with a smile and quickly followed in. After entering, a clamor suddenly sounded, causing Lin Yi to pause. He looked up and saw that he was surrounded by a large hall with several entrances. There was a counter in the middle of the hall. Shen Qingyun and Qin Yu were waiting in front of the counter. "Junior brother Lin, come quickly." Shen Qingyun waved her hand. Seeing this, Lin Yi hurried over. Before he could say anything, Shen Qingyun stretched out her hand and said, "How many saint stones do you have? Give it to me." The corners of his mouth twitched. Lin Yi looked around and immediately saw the sign hanging on the wall. After entering the beast battle arena, one had to use special chips to place a bet. This was to prevent people from falsely reporting that they didn't have many saint stones. "Senior sister Shen, are we really going to bet?" Lin Yi was incomparably depressed. They came here to search for the 5 spirit gods' relic. He didn't expect Shen Qingyun to drag him to gamble. Why not? Shin Qingyun pouted and said, so stingy? Then I'll take it as borrowing from you first. I'll return it to you in the future. There's no need for that. With a sigh, Lin Yi took out 2,000,000 saint stones. In an instant, Shin Qingyun was overjoyed. She smiled and said, that's more like it. 2,000,000 saint stones? The person at the counter was stunned. The corners of his mouth twitched. His originally relaxed expression immediately became serious. Miss, are you sure you want to exchange 2,000,000 saint stones at once? 2,000,000 saint stones was a considerable amount of wealth even for the great sage. Although there were many people in the great desolate city, their strength was not comparable to the 4 great regions. Therefore, they were moved when they saw so many saint stones. Yes, quickly exchange. Shin Qingyun's heroic spirit reached the clouds. She waved her hand, but Lin Ye's face darkened. This was his holy stone. However, when Lin Yi thought about it, these saint stones were given to him by Flawless White. His mood became much better. Anyway, they were not his saint stones. If they were wasted, so be it. As if he was frightened by Shin Qingyun's heroism, the person at the counter took out 2,200,000 saint stones. He said respectfully, ladies and gentlemen, here are 2,200,000 saint stones. Have fun. The VIP area is on the 3rd basement level. There are fewer people and it's quieter. However, before the person could finish speaking, Shin Qingyun had already pulled Lin Yi and Qin Yu into a passage. Seeing this, the person at the counter's eyelids twitched violently. He immediately took out a jade tablet and carved something on it. Then, he crushed it. Phew! Such a forthright person. Could it be a first-rank clan? Or someone from the 4 great regions? Looks like we have to be more careful during this period. After entering the 1st basement level, the clamor filled the air, causing Lin Yi to frown slightly. Shin Qingyun was indeed completely high. She kept running around the arena. In the bestial battle arena, the bets were either on exotic beasts, martial arts battles, or competitions. It was extremely lively. However, most of the people who came to the bestial battle arena were men. At this time, the 2 beautiful girls, Shin Qingyun and Qin Yu, came in and caused a huge commotion. Almost everyone turned their attention to Lin Yi and the rest. Hey, these rabbits are so cute. They look like armored rabbits. Their armor hasn't grown out yet. Suddenly, Shin Qingyun was attracted by a group of rabbits. She squatted on the ground and played with the rabbits. If they are raised, it seems like the taste of braised rabbit meat will be very good. Lin Yi touched his nose and glanced at them. He did not find anything interesting. Hey! Shin Qingyun looked at Lin Yi with disdain. How can you think like that? Oh right, let's make a bet. Bet on what? Lin Yi shrugged and said casually, the chips in your hands are all mine. If you win, I'll promise you one thing. How about it? Shin Qingyun rolled her eyes and a crafty look flashed across her eyes. Lin Yi raised his eyebrows. Not interested. You can bet with the others. Are you scared? Shin Qingyun stuck out her tongue. Miss, if he is not willing to bet with you, I am willing to bet with you. Suddenly, a voice sounded. The smile on Shin Qingyun's face gradually froze. End of chapter. Chapter 737. Miss, I'm willing to bet with you. Amidst the chuckles, a figure slowly walked over. Lin Yi and the other 2 raised their eyebrows when they saw who it was. The young man was dressed in a brocade robe and held a paper fan in his hand. He looked quite handsome. Behind him were several guards. It was obvious that the force behind him had a high status in Grand Desolation City. This made Lin Yi sigh faintly in his heart. Sure enough, a femme fatale. With a solemn expression, Shin Qingyun glanced at the young man and suddenly smiled. Sure, but do you have enough chips? I'm not going to play a small game. I'm afraid you can't afford it. Hearing this, the young man was taken aback and immediately laughed out loud. Ha ha ha, you're forthright. Since you want to play, I'll play with you. Behind the young man, several guards began to laugh. Are you kidding? We're from the Mu clan, and our young master is the young master of the Mu clan. How can we not afford it? Ha ha, young master, do you want us to go back and get some more saint stones? Amidst the laughter, the rest of the people in the bestial battle arena looked over. When they saw the young man in the brocade robe, their eyes lit up and they surrounded him. It seems that the young master of the Mu clan is going to bet with someone else. It seems to be a girl. TSK, the young master of the Mu clan has good eyesight. He rarely makes mistakes. I think that group is going to lose big time. It seems that Mu Tian has never lost a few rounds, unless he meets the geniuses of the 4 major territories. The crowd discussed in low voices and pointed at Lin Yi, Shin Qingyun, and the others from time to time. Lin Yi could not help but frown. It seemed that the young man in the brocade robe was not a good-for-nothing. He was quite capable. Not bad. Shin Qingyun's eyes lit up and she smiled. Interesting. Tell me, how do you want to bet? Mu Tian grinned and said, since you like these rabbits so much, why don't we bet on them? Will it be a civil battle or a martial battle? Shin Qingyun asked directly. Mu Tian's eyes also lit up. It seems that Miss is an expert. Hearing Shin Qingyun's words, Mu Tian understood that Shin Qingyun definitely did not come here to ask casually, which made him excited. Although he fancied Shin Qingyun's appearance as a gambler, it was still good to have a chance to have fun. How about a battle of wits and a battle of martial arts? Mu Tian smiled and said, 2 chances. I want to see how strong you are. There's no need for that. I'm afraid you won't be able to afford it if we do it twice. Shin Qingyun glanced at Mu Tian, her eyes full of disdain. The corner of Mu Tian's mouth twitched as she felt very hurt. Just as she was about to speak, she heard the middle-aged man beside the rabbit cage say with a smile, since it's a martial battle, then I'll open the arena. As his voice sounded, the middle-aged man gently waved his right hand. A light screen condensed into an arena that appeared in front of everyone. The 2 of you, please choose your rabbit and wager. Mu Tian took a deep breath and chuckled softly. Miss, I wonder if you can accept 100,000 wager? Hiss, 100,000. It's just one game, and you're betting 100,000. The Mu clan is indeed the Mu clan. Only a force like the Mu clan can take out so many wagers in the gambling arena. 100,000 saint stones was a considerable amount of wealth for an ordinary saint. 100,000? Shin Qingyun's expression immediately became strange. She stared at Mu Tian and asked, Are you serious? Ahem. Mu Tian coughed softly and said in an extremely gentlemanly manner, If Miss thinks it's too much, we can reduce it a little. Too much? Shin Qingyun burst out laughing and said with contempt, That's too little. I've never bet less than 1,000,000. I wonder if you can afford 1,000,000 wager. The corner of Shin Qingyun's mouth curled up. She took out a red wager and handed it to the middle-aged man. In an instant, the crowd was stunned. Even the middle-aged man was stunned as he stared blankly at Shin Qingyun. A red wager was the highest wager in the bestial battle arena. Normally, no one would use it. Mu Tian couldn't help but blush when he saw the bright red wager. He felt a burning pain as if someone had whipped him. He had just said that he had 100,000 wager, but someone had taken out 1,000,000. This was a blatant slap to his face. Hiss, it's really 1,000,000 wager. Heavens, this girl must have a powerful force behind her. How can an ordinary force take out so many wagers at once? Not necessarily. Maybe she's favored. Although 1,000,000 saint stones is a lot, it's not important in the eyes of a first-rank clan. Not to mention a first-rank clan, even a second-rank clan can take it out if they grit their teeth. It won't hurt them. Amidst the exclamations, the crowd couldn't help but guess the identity of Lin Yi, Shin Qingyun, and the others. In the Grand Desolation City, Lin Yi and the others were unfamiliar faces. If they suddenly took out such a large amount of wealth, it would definitely arouse suspicion and jealousy. Of course, there would also be some people who had some special thoughts. How about it? Shin Qingyun said casually. Can you take out a million wager? The corner of Mu Tian's mouth twitched. He didn't expect that he would be slapped in the face just because he wanted to get close to Shin Qingyun. A million wager was not a big deal to his family, but it was not easy for him to use a million wager. What? Weren't you so confident just now? Shin Qingyun yawned. She didn't take Mu Tian seriously at all. Mu Tian frowned. Just as he was about to speak, his eyes lit up. He gritted his teeth and said, "Okay, a million wager, I'll follow." If Mu Tian had just wanted to get to know Shin Qingyun, now he wanted to win the million wager from Shin Qingyun. A million wager was enough to buy a high-grade supreme sacred artifact and raise his strength to another level. In this world where the strong were respected, raising one's strength was always more important than women. Hey, how many holy stones do you have? Go and exchange all of them for chips. Mu Tian glared at the guards and urged them to exchange their chips. No need. Shin Qingyun said indifferently, you can bet 100,000 wager. If you lose, in addition to the 100,000 wager, give me another 900,000 holy stones. Okay. Mu Tian nodded slightly. He couldn't help but clench his fists. He was extremely excited. Looking at the bright red wager, his eyes were full of desire. Gulp. The middle-aged man swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Only then did he react. He hurriedly accepted Shin Qingyun and Mu Tian's wager. Immediately, he revealed a flattering smile. Miss, please choose the armored rabbit. In an instant, the onlookers gathered around and stared at Shin Qingyun and the others. They were very curious. Was Shin Qingyun bold because of her skill, or did she have too many holy stones? End of chapter. Chapter 738. The so-called battle in the bestial battle arena was a wager. Both parties would use their eyesight to pick demonic beasts of similar cultivation levels and races and let them fight. Whoever picked the winning demonic beast would win. This was not just a test of luck, but more of a test of eyesight. Although Mu Tian was young, he had been in the bestial battle arena for many years. His eyesight was strong and he rarely lost. The people who were attracted by the wager were all envious of Mu Tian. 1 million chips. If he won, he could get 800,000 saint stones even if he took the bestial battle arena's commission. Taking a deep breath, Mu Tian suppressed his excitement and said with a smile, Miss, you are a guest from afar. Please choose first. Okay. Shin Qingyun did not waste any time. She immediately squatted down and started to choose the armored rabbit. Lin Yi and Qing Yu were also sizing him up carefully, but they became suspicious. They could see that these armored rabbits were all in their infancy. Their physiques were similar, and their mental states were not very good. There was basically nothing special about them. In this way, wouldn't the outcome of the battle depend on the will of the heavens? Lin Yi, do you think senior sister Shen can win? Qing Yu asked softly. I think so. Lin Yi rubbed his nose. When he saw that Shin Qingyun was picking the armored rabbits with good looks and kept muttering whether they looked good or not, his face turned ugly. Was this a wager? Phew, it doesn't matter. It's just 1 million saint stones. If I lose, I lose. Lin Yi let out a breath. He did not care too much. To them, 1 million saint stones were useless. Mu Tian sensed this and became excited. He was definitely going to win this battle. Other people might pick spirit beasts casually, but he was different. He had special means to make spirit beasts mutate and release power beyond their own for a short time. He lost a few times before because he wanted to build a good relationship with the geniuses of the 4 major regions. When he saw that Shin Qingyun was so forthright, he thought that she also had some special means. But now it seemed that he was wrong. This girl can easily take out 1 million saint stones. It's clear that the faction behind her isn't weak. Even if I win against her, I have to leave a good impression on her. If I can be with her, it might be an opportunity for me. Thinking of this, Mu Tian immediately walked up with a light smile and guided Shen Qingyun to choose the iron-armored rabbit. He could see that Shen Qingyun didn't know much about spirit beasts. However, Shen Qingyun was extremely vexed by Mu Tian's guidance. With a cold snort, Shen Qingyun ignored Mu Tian and quickly picked a cute iron shell rabbit. This girl seems to be picking at random. Does she know how to pick? That iron-armored rabbit's physique is so weak. Why do I feel that she's here to deliver the holy stone to Mu Tian? That's right. She seems to pick whichever rabbit she sees is pretty. When the discussion reached this point, everyone could not help but fall silent. They didn't understand the world of the rich. Miss, are you sure? Mu Tian revealed a gentlemanly smile and didn't change in the slightest because of Shen Qingyun's indifference. Aren't you annoying? Hurry up and pick one. Shen Qingyun was in high spirits. The iron-armored rabbit I chose will definitely win. Hee, is that so? The corners of Mu Tian's mouth curled up. He didn't even look at those rabbits and casually picked one up and threw it onto the arena formed by the light. Hiss, is Mu Tian giving way to that girl? He didn't even look. Is Mu Tian that confident? Or is he willing to give up 1,000,000 saint stones for a beauty? No, from what I see, Mu Tian is definitely confident. Don't forget that he's quite sensitive to spirit beasts. When the spectators saw this scene, they were all stunned. They were convinced that Shen Qingyun was rich and willful, but what was Mu Tian trying to do? He didn't even want the 1,000,000 saint stones in his hands? However, Lin Ye's expression became serious. When Mu Tian picked up the iron-armored rabbit just now, a green light flashed from Mu Tian's hand and entered the iron-armored rabbit's body. Mu Tian's speed was too fast. If Lin Yi hadn't coincidentally glanced at it, he probably wouldn't have noticed. So he's only able to maintain such a high winning rate by using some tricks? Lin Yi raised his eyebrows and couldn't help but smile. If Mu Tian didn't do anything, Lin Yi wouldn't care. It was just 1,000,000 saint stones. If he lost, so be it. However, if he wanted to use some tricks to cheat the saint stones, wouldn't he be treating Sibu Gakuin as if there was no one else? Lin Yi was about to step forward and ask Shen Qingyun to change to another iron-armored rabbit when he saw that Shen Qingyun had already thrown the iron-armored rabbit onto the arena. He couldn't help but frown. Once the spirit beasts of both sides entered the light screen arena, they couldn't leave. Lin Yi couldn't help but hesitate. He didn't know if Biluo could affect the two iron-armored rabbits through the light screen as a soul. At this moment, the two iron-armored rabbits on the light screen arena were provoked and started to attack each other. At first, it was fine. Both sides were evenly matched because their physiques were similar. However, as time passed, the iron-armored rabbit chosen by Mu Tian became more and more courageous. Even if its body was injured, it wouldn't retreat. It was incomparably brave. After Shen Qingyun's iron-armored rabbit was hit a few times, it was terrified and didn't dare to fight back. It just kept defending. It seems like it's going to lose. Sensing this, Shen Qingyun pouted and waved her little hands to cheer for the iron-armored rabbit. The surrounding crowd shook their heads and were all envious of Mu Tian. To be able to win 1,000,000 saint stones in a bet, what kind of luck was this? Frowning slightly, Lin Yi called out to Biluo in his consciousness, wanting to interfere with this bet. After learning of Lin Ye's request, Biluo didn't reply. In the next moment, a strange cat with wings suddenly appeared on Lin Ye's shoulder. Awo! As soon as the strange cat appeared, it licked Lin Ye's cheek. Little guy, you can interfere with the two iron-armored rabbits in the light screen? Just as he was about to throw the strange cat down, Lin Yi thought of this possibility and stared at the strange cat. Meow meow. The strange cat blinked and immediately stretched out its paw to tap on the light screen. An invisible wave quietly rippled and disappeared into the light screen arena. Lin Yi turned his head and saw that the iron-armored rabbit, which was getting more and more courageous, trembled. It took a few steps back and stiffened on the spot. The power in its body also began to dissipate. Previously, Mu Tian had done something to it to stimulate its mind so that it couldn't feel pain and temporarily burst out with powerful strength. But now that stimulation had disappeared. The iron-armored rabbit felt intense pain and couldn't hold on anymore. It fell to the ground with a bang. What's going on? It's about to win. What's wrong with it? It suddenly has no strength? Seeing this scene, everyone was stunned and astonished. It was the first time they had seen such a situation in a bet. End of chapter. Chapter 739. Mu Tian shook his head violently, unable to believe his eyes. The method he used was enough to keep the demonic beast in a state of mental stimulation for an hour. How could it end so quickly? For a moment, Mu Tian became anxious. Although the stimulation effect of this method was very strong, there would be a strong backlash after it lost its effect. Cuckoo! At this moment, Shen Qingyun's armored rabbit noticed the abnormality. Its eyes were slightly red as it raised the armor on its forehead and charged towards Mu Tian's armored rabbit. Bang! The iron-armored rabbit had already suffered a strong backlash. Without any defensive power, it was directly sent flying and heavily slammed into the light curtain. Under this heavy blow, the iron-armored rabbit was unable to endure any longer and fainted. No. Mu Tian's expression changed drastically as he exclaimed, "How is this possible? How could it suddenly become so weak? It must be you guys who are playing tricks." In anger and fear, Mu Tian's eyes were bloodshot as he stared at Shen Qingyun. That was 1,000,000 saint stones. Even he felt the pinch. Moreover, he had suddenly lost when he thought he was about to win and had lost 1,000,000 saint stones. How could he not be angry? "It must be you guys who are playing tricks in the dark." You, glaring fiercely at Lin Yi and the others, Mu Tian waved his hand. In an instant, a dozen guards surrounded Lin Yi and the others. The surrounding crowd was also extremely surprised as they looked curiously at Lin Yi and the others. They also thought that Lin Yi and the others were playing tricks. After all, Mu Tian's defeat was too unbelievable. Seeing this scene, the middle-aged man was stunned. He was stunned for a moment before he shouted coldly, "Mu Tian, are you trying to cause trouble in the beast battle arena? If someone is playing tricks, it will be our people who will deal with it." Humph! Hearing this, Mu Tian gradually calmed down. He waved his hand and dismissed the guards, but he still stared at Lin Yi and the others. "TSK, can't afford to lose?" Shen Qingyun blinked her eyes and suddenly laughed. "Weren't you very arrogant just now? You can't afford to lose a mere 1,000,000 saint stones? Damn it! You must have done something to it. Otherwise, why would my steel-armored rabbit suddenly die?" Mu Tian sneered. "Hurry up and call out the people inside the Animal Fighting Coliseum to check that rabbit. They will definitely find something abnormal." Crash! Suddenly, a series of footsteps could be heard as more than a dozen armored guards rushed over. The leader of the group had a burly figure with saint energy surging in his body. He was actually a great sage powerhouse. What happened? The leader glanced at the crowd and frowned when he saw that it was Mu Tian who was causing trouble. The Mu family was not weak in the Grand Desolation City. He did not want to fall out with Mu Tian, so he immediately went up to her. "Young Master Mu, what's wrong?" Mu Tian snorted coldly and said in a low voice, "Commander Zhang, you came at the right time. These three people are using other means to influence the demonic beast. If you don't believe me, you can check the demonic beast. Someone actually dares to cause trouble in the Animal Fighting Coliseum?" Hearing that, Zhang Yongming's face suddenly turned serious as he looked in the direction where Mu Tian was pointing. "That's true. If you check it, you will definitely find something unexpected." Lin Yi suddenly took a step forward and said in a low voice, You guys go and check the demonic beast that young Master Mu chose. Look carefully and see how it is damaged. If I'm not wrong, it should be a backlash after being stimulated. There should be something wrong with its internal organs. It is not a shock injury caused by the collision. What? You, hearing Lin Ye's words, the corner of Mu Tian's mouth twitched and he could not help but take a few steps back. Looking at Lin Yi, his eyes were filled with horror. Mu Tian could not believe that Lin Yi had seen through his trick. He had dominated the animal fighting coliseum in the Grand Desolation City for more than a decade and earned countless saint stones and resources. Even the top powerhouses in the animal fighting coliseum did not notice it and thought that he had a special sense for demonic beasts. This is... Zhang Yongming rolled his eyes and glanced at Mu Tian. Seeing that his forehead was covered in sweat, his heart suddenly trembled. He was sure that Mu Tian was hiding something. After staring at Mu Tian for a moment, Zhang Yongming asked in a deep voice, "Young Master Mu, what is going on?" "Cough, cough, no problem." Mu Tian hurriedly said, "I admit defeat in this bet." What a joke, Lin Yi had already said it. If he went to check it, it was inevitable that he would find out that he had done something. Speaking of this, Mu Tian could not help but glare fiercely at Lin Yi. He was still surprised and did not understand how Lin Yi could see through his trick. Even many top powerhouses in the Great Sage could not see through it. How could Lin Yi, a saint, see through it? Someone, go and check it. However, Zhang Yongming waved his hand and motioned for someone to check. In an instant, Mu Tian's face was extremely pale. "Oh, guilty," Lin Yi said indifferently. "The thief is crying out to catch the thief. You're quite good at this." "The thief is crying out to catch the thief?" Shin Qingyun blinked and suddenly asked, "Junior brother Lin, you're saying that this guy secretly did something?" As soon as he finished speaking, everyone was shocked. The onlookers went crazy. That's impossible, right? Mu Tian has been in the animal fighting arena for more than 10 years. He chooses the demonic beasts purely based on his own judgment. Moreover, he rarely comes into contact with demonic beasts. How could he do something? Yes, there were many top great sage powerhouses in the beginning, but they did not see through Mu Tian's trick. Hearing this, the nervous Mu Tian's face relaxed a lot. As long as others believed him, everything would be easy. "Commander, one of the 2 steel-armored rabbits is fine. Although it's injured, it's all superficial wounds. As for the other steel-armored rabbit..." Speaking of this, the disciple who came forward to check glanced at Mu Tian and continued, "Its internal organs are all damaged. Moreover, it's damaged from the inside out, not because of the impact. However, its internal injuries are recovering. In a while, it will be completely recovered." Hearing this, Mu Tian's face was extremely pale. Ordinary sages might not understand these principles, but Zhang Yongming was a great sage. How could he not understand? "Haha, young Master Mu, you're really good at this." Zhang Yongming's face darkened. He looked at Mu Tian with an extremely cold expression. They had suspected Mu Tian previously, but they had not caught him doing anything. After the competition, there was no problem when they checked the demonic beast's physique. Unexpectedly, Mu Tian had calculated the time and coincidentally ended the competition. Coincidentally, the demonic beasts that he had tampered with had also recovered. Mu Tian's face changed drastically. He suddenly turned around, and the spiritual energy in his body surged. A powerful force swept out like a tsunami. End of chapter. Chapter 740. Boom, boom, boom. The violent force swept across. Most of the onlookers were weak and could not withstand it. They were sent flying. At the same time, several of Mu Tian's guards rushed out and blocked the crowd, allowing Mu Tian to escape quickly. "How dare you run?" Many of the animal arena's guards were shocked. They were about to rush forward but were stopped by Zhang Yongming. "Don't chase. Tie these guards up." Then, we will go to the Mu family and settle the score with them. Zhang Yongming sneered. The Mu family is a big family. How can he run away? Hearing that, the Animal Arena's guards rushed forward and caught the Mu family's guards. The Mu family's guards understood that they were powerless to resist. Their mission was completed and they surrendered. Lin Yi glanced at Zhang Yongming and said indifferently, "We won this battle. Are you not going to give us the chips?" Ahem, I forgot. The middle-aged man coughed awkwardly and handed 1,000,000 chips to Shen Qingyun. Shen Qingyun was overjoyed when she received the chips and smiled. To her, the holy stones were not a problem. The main thing was that they won. "Brother, thank you for your reminder." Zhang Yongming walked to Lin Yi and bowed slightly. He asked, "How did you know that he had done something? If possible, we will go to the Mu family later to ask for an explanation. Can you come with us to prove it? Of course, we will also reward you." Even now, Zhang Yongming and the rest did not know what Mu Tian had done. They were worried that Mu Tian would go back on his word. Therefore, they wanted Lin Yi to go with them. Forget about the reward. Lin Yi yawned and said indifferently, "Coincidentally, I am also going to the Mu family to ask for the rest of the bet. Let's go together." "Ah, not playing anymore?" Hearing that, Shen Qingyun exclaimed and looked at Lin Yi angrily. Some time ago, she had been following Theta Scarabii to cultivate. Now that she finally had the chance to come out, she wanted to play for a while longer. "You want to play? Can you continue playing?" Lin Yi shrugged his shoulders. Upon seeing this, Shen Qingyun looked around and realized that everyone's eyes were focused on them. She could not help but stick out her tongue. At this time, Shen Qingyun also understood that she couldn't play anymore. "All right, let's go and collect our debt." Shen Qingyun rubbed her nose and smiled. "It seems that collecting debts is quite interesting." "Interesting?" Hearing Shen Qingyun's words, the corners of Zhang Yongming's mouth couldn't help but twitch. He took a deep look at Lin Yi and the other two. "Phew, the three of you, please wait outside for a moment. If there's anything you need, just tell them directly. I'll go find them right away." Zhang Yongming bowed slightly to Lin Yi and the other two before quickly leaving. A few guards brought Lin Yi out of the crowd and came to the hall. Shen Qingyun took back the chips and handed the holy stone to Lin Yi. Junior brother Lin, look how awesome I am. Not only did I not spend your holy stone, I even earned a lot for you." Shen Qingyun had a brilliant smile on her face. Her beautiful face caused everyone in the hall to turn silent. Lin Yi did not accept the holy stone and said softly, "Keep it. We still have to stay in the desolate god realm for a while." "All right." Shen Qingyun did not stand on ceremony with Lin Yi and took it back. She was so fast that Lin Yi and Qinyue didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Not long after, Zhang Yongming and an old man rushed out. "The three of you, let me introduce you. This is our Beast Battle Arena's third elder, Su Tianjing." Zhang Yongming pointed at the old man. Lin Yi and the other two glanced at him. Their expressions did not change, and they only nodded slightly. Sensing this, the corners of Su Tianjing and Zhang Yongming's mouths twitched. Especially that old man, who was at the peak of the great sage realm. Who wouldn't bow to him when they saw him? Being ignored today, he immediately felt angry in his heart. But when he thought about it, even he could not detect Mu Tian's movements, but Lin Yi could. There must be something special about her. He immediately suppressed the anger in his heart and revealed a smile. "The three of you, it's all thanks to you that my Beast Battle Arena's losses were avoided. Here are 5,000,000 holy stones. Take it as this old man's thank you gift." As he spoke, Su Tianjing raised his hand and took out a storage ring. On the way here, he had already learned about the previous situation from Zhu Mingyong. He understood that Lin Yi and the other two had a strong force behind them, so he was rather generous. "No need, we're just protecting our rights." Shaking his head slightly, Lin Yi said indifferently, "When are we going to the Mu clan?" Seeing Lin Ye's stern rejection and Shen Qingyun's indifferent expressions, he already knew that Lin Yi and the other two were indeed not interested in 5 million holy stones. He immediately put it away and was even more surprised. Even a first-rank family would be tempted by 5 million holy stones. Could it be that these three people were from a first-rank family that was ranked at the top? Su Tianjing rolled his eyes and said in a deep voice, "The Mu clan has gone too far. They actually used underhanded methods to cheat my beast battle arena of resources. This time, I will not let them off easily. However, I still need your help to correct me. After this matter is over, I'll give you a big gift." After sensing that the force behind Lin Yi and the other two was not weak, Su Tianjing had already decided in his heart that he must establish a connection with Lin Yi and the others. "There's no need for that." Lin Yi glanced at Su Tianjing and said indifferently, "You guys lead the way." "Okay." Su Tianjing grinned and cursed in his heart. Then, he waved his hand and led Zhang Yongming and the others out of the beast battle arena in a mighty manner. Lin Yi and the other two followed behind leisurely. In an instant, the entire Grand Desolation City was in an uproar. The beast battle arena was one of the top forces in Grand Desolation City. Usually, no one dared to provoke them. Now that the beast battle arena was making such a big fuss, everyone was shocked. In addition, some insiders had revealed the news. Almost everyone was looking forward to the clash between the beast battle arena and the Mu clan. They all rushed to the Mu clan. As a result, before Su Tianjing and the others reached the Mu clan was already surrounded by onlookers. At the same time, in the backyard of the Mu clan, bang! The crisp sound of a slap was heard. In the next moment, Mu Tian's body was sent flying and crashed heavily into the wall. "Trash, it's just a loss. Why are you still talking about tampering? Ask someone to check. Aren't you courting death?" An angry roar was heard. An old man glared at Mu Tian, his face full of anger. If no one stopped him, he would probably beat Mu Tian to death. "Father, I didn't expect that bastard to see through my tampering." Mu Tian covered her face and was extremely depressed. "That's enough, get out of here. You're not allowed to return to Grand Desolation City for a month. After I've settled this matter, I'll make arrangements for you." The old man waved his hand and said helplessly, "If you don't get out of here now, you'll be in trouble when the people from the beast battle arena come." As soon as he finished speaking, he looked as if he had aged 10 years. His entire person became haggard. End of chapter. Chapter 741. "That's right, Father. Why should we be afraid of the bestial battle arena?" Mu Tian blinked and asked suspiciously, "We have other powers behind us. Why should we be afraid of them?" "Humph, you good-for-nothing, still dawdling here. Hurry up and get lost." Mu Zheng's eyes widened. He waved his hand again and slapped at Mu Tian, sending her flying. "Get lost, the bestial battle arena also has other powers behind them. Hurry up and run to the cities of the 4 great domains. Only then can we guarantee your safety." Hearing Mu Zheng's words, Mu Tian immediately looked pitiful. What a joke, the Mu family's power was limited to the Grand Desolated City. Even the people behind them could only show off in the desolate God realm. If they were in the 4 great domains, wouldn't they have to tuck their tails between their legs and behave themselves? However, on second thought, there were other powers behind the bestial battle arena as well. If he did not leave, he would have to pay a huge price. At this thought, Mu Tian no longer hesitated. He immediately got up and ran towards the back door. However, before Mu Tian could run out, several servants rushed in from all directions. Their faces were filled with panic. "Old master, this is bad. Many people have surrounded the Mu family. I heard that the people from the bestial battle arena will be here soon. Old master, what should we do?" Mu Tian's face changed drastically. It was as white as a sheet and was devoid of blood. His heart was filled with panic. The corners of Mu Zheng's mouth twitched. He turned around and looked at Mu Tian. His eyes were filled with pain as if he was struggling with something. Father, what should I do now? Mu Tian sat down on the ground and stared blankly at Mu Zheng. Few carry this. No matter what, don't say that you tampered with it. I'll find someone now. Mu Zheng clenched his fists and suddenly crushed the jade pendant on his waist. His expression was extremely solemn. Mu Tian was his son after all. He could not give up until the very last moment. All right, father, I'll listen to you. Swallowing a mouthful of saliva, Mu Tian couldn't help but resent Lin Yi and Shin Qingyun. If it had not been for Lin Yi, he would not have been discovered. It goes without saying that the bestial battle arena had acted quickly and did not give Mu Tian any time to escape. In less than the time it took to brew a cup of tea, Su Tianjing had already brought many guards to the Mu family. Taking a deep breath, Su Tianjing clenched his right hand into a fist. His saint energy surged and turned into a giant tiger, slamming into the door of the Mu family. Bang! The door made of gold and iron was smashed away, and the entire Mu family trembled. Mu Zheng, you old bastard, get out here! The roar of a furious dragon reverberated in the air. All of a sudden, the crowd became excited. They hadn't even met yet, but the smell of gunpowder was already so strong. Wouldn't they definitely start fighting later? The onlookers were extremely excited, but they took a few steps back. Mu Zheng's cultivation was at the pinnacle of the great sage. If they really fought, his destructive power would be extremely strong. They did not want to suffer an undeserved calamity. Ha ha ha, old ghost Su, why have you come to my Mu clan? Amidst the loud laughter, shocking saintly might descended and spread out, instantly eliminating the sound wave. A figure, dressed in martial attire, walked out from the inner courtyard with several elders behind him. The Mu clan was still a powerful force. Other than Mu Zheng, there were two other powerhouses at the Great Sage realm. This strength was not much weaker than the various forces in Luori City. Mu Zheng, how can you not know what your son has done? Su Tianjing took a step forward, his eyes fixed on the elder. He said in a low voice, "What a scheme. I used to think that Mu Tian was really capable. I didn't expect him to be a thief. He actually used underhanded means to trick my bestial battle arena. But if you want to trick my bestial battle arena, your Mu clan alone is not enough." Speaking of this, Su Tianjing's anger surged. If not for the fact that the Mu clan was not weak, he would have already rushed up to attack. Over the years, Mu Tian had won a lot of resources from the bestial battle arena. Ha ha, what a joke! Mu Zheng laughed coldly. Old ghost Su, when did you become so shameless? I think that your bestial battle arena can't afford to lose, so you slandered my son. You said that my son used underhanded means. I wonder what underhanded means he used? Back then, dozens of great sage realm powerhouses and a few invincible saints praised my son. How could he have used underhanded means? Hearing Mu Zheng's words, the surrounding crowd was stunned and could not help but look at Su Tianjing. Those powerhouses did not see through Mu Tian's underhanded means, so they naturally did not believe it. They really thought that the bestial battle arena was causing trouble. Humph, I knew that you would say that. Su Tianjing laughed coldly, turned to Lin Yi, and said in a low voice, "Little brother, please expose Mu Tian's underhanded means." You, glancing at Su Tianjing, Lin Yi sighed, his heart full of disdain. Just by looking at Mu Zheng's words, he could tell that they were determined to deny it. At this time, there was no need to talk about reasons. They could just use their fists. Shaking his head slightly, Lin Yi said to Mu Zheng, "Call your son out. He made a bet with my senior sister earlier, and there's still 900,000 saint stones that he hasn't paid." Interesting? Hearing that, Mu Zheng laughed coldly again. He sized up Lin Yi, and after realizing that his aura was only that of an invincible saint, he said disdainfully, Who are you? Where did you come from? You say that my son owes you a bet, so he owes you a bet? I didn't expect that your bestial battle arena would be so shameless. You, old bastard, your Mu family is really shameless to the extreme. Hearing Mu Zheng's words, Su Tianjing was furious. The saint energy in his body was like thunder, exploding in the air, and surging power bloomed. What, you want to fight? Mu Zheng's shoulders shook, and his saint energy also erupted, blocking the saint aura that filled the sky. Both of them were at the peak of the great sage realm, and their strength was similar. If they wanted to fight, it would be inevitable that both of them would suffer. At the same time, the two great sage saints behind Mu Zheng also took a step forward, and the saint energy in their bodies gushed out continuously. With their help, Su Tianjing suddenly felt the pressure increase, and he could not help but take a few steps back. Sigh. With a soft sigh, Lin Yi waved his right hand lightly, and the 5 elements territory exploded, instantly eliminating all of the saint aura. What? How is this possible? Mu Zheng and the rest's arms shook, and they staggered back a few steps. When they looked up, their expressions immediately turned grave. They could not believe that a mere invincible saint could break through their saint aura. I say, are you really going to renege on my senior sister's bet? Raising his eyebrows slightly, Lin Ye's voice gradually turned cold, and a cold light suddenly flashed in his eyes as he looked at Mu Zheng and the rest. End of chapter. Chapter 742. I say, are you really going to renege on my senior sister's bet? Mu Zheng and the rest felt their bodies tremble, and they could not help but take a few more steps back. Such power! Su Tianjing's mouth was agape. He was shocked when he saw Lin Ye's expression. Humph, don't even think about extorting the Mu family. Mu Zheng shook his head and laughed coldly. I've already sent the news to the Thunderclap sect. You're finished. Thunderclap sect. Su Tianjing's mouth twitched. Mu Zheng, do you really want to make a big deal out of this? What do you mean by making a big deal out of this? Mu Zheng shouted. I think the animal arena is trying to extort the Mu family. You said that my son used underhanded means to get back the resources. Fine, I can give them to you. But now you've joined forces with others to cheat us of 1 million saint stones. Impossible. You bastard, you're unreasonable. Su Tianjing was infuriated. He was so infuriated that he wanted nothing more than to kill Mu Zheng right away. However, Mu Zheng was too powerful. He alone could not defeat Mu Zheng. He had thought that the animal arena's reputation would be enough to suppress Mu Zheng and make him admit his mistake. However, he did not expect Mu Zheng to be so unyielding and call for help. In this way, it would be difficult for anyone to clean up the mess. Phew, I don't care if you call for help or not. There's only one thing I want. Give me the saint stones. Lin Yi said calmly. My senior sister finally made a bet with someone. If you can't even get what you want and she gets angry, all of you will die. All of you will die. Haha, what a boastful tone. Mu Zheng laughed when he heard that. His face was full of mockery. You little dolls dare to boast so shamelessly? You're just a saint. Don't think that you have the right to talk to us just because you can break through our saint aura. Mu Zheng sneered and waved his hand. Qingping, go and kill this guy. He's too noisy. Hee hee, yes. As soon as he finished speaking, a great sage beside Lin Yi leaped up, raising a sharp blade in his hand and thrusting it towards Lin Yi. Buzz. The sound of something breaking through the air rang out. In an instant, a sharp wind whistled out and filled the entire space. Feeling that strong fluctuation, the onlookers immediately took a few steps back, their expressions extremely solemn. At this moment, no one dared to underestimate the Mu clan. Shwa. Suddenly, a silver-white light flashed. Endless saber intent was like a hurricane, gathering crazily. The figure in the air suddenly stiffened, and the light in his eyes gradually faded. Poochie. Blood splattered everywhere. That figure collapsed with a loud bang, as if fireworks were set off. Blood splattered all over the ground. Some even landed on the faces of Mu Jing and the others, causing their mouths to twitch. Following their dazed gazes, they saw a young lady standing not far away from them with a huge saber in her hand. Her expression was indifferent, but the strong saber intent frightened them so much that they did not dare to move. In an instant, Mu Jing broke down. What was going on? Didn't they only offend the beast fighting arena? Why did another saber Dao expert appear? You reneged on my bet and dared to attack my people. Oh, the Mu clan is really bold. A smile appeared on Shen Qingyun's face as she tilted her head slightly. However, her biting cold words almost caused Mu Jing to cry. At this moment, no matter how stupid he was, he could tell that the person who had bet with Mu Tian was this girl. Father! At this moment, Mu Tian tidied up her clothes and rushed out from the inner courtyard. It's you! As soon as she came out, Mu Tian saw Lin Yi and Shen Qingyun, and her expression immediately turned grim. After that, she shouted with a grim voice, "Bastard! Both of you actually dared to come to my Mu clan. You're courting death." Hearing this, Mu Jing could not help but close his eyes and shed tears of regret. What sin did I commit to have such a foolish son? Can't you see the current situation clearly? Clap, clap, clap. The sound of clapping was heard. Lin Yi looked at Mu Tian as though he was looking at a fool. He sighed and said, "I advise you to look at the current situation and think about how to speak to me." Hearing this, Mu Tian blinked and turned her head. She was stunned when she realized that her father and the other expert of the Great Sage realm did not even dare to move. They were only trembling on the spot. What is going on? Mu Tian's mouth was slightly agape. She was extremely shocked. In her memory, her father was already one of the top experts in the Great Wasteland City. As long as no one from the 4 great regions came, almost no one could compete with him. Even the beast fighting arena would be wary of her father's strength. But now, the extremely powerful father in her heart was trembling in front of Shen Qingyun. "Oh, senior sister and I are only here to take back the bet. By the way, your methods are very despicable and immoral." Lin Yi took a step forward and slowly walked toward Mu Tian and Mu Jing. He said indifferently, "Hand over 900,000 saint stones and we'll leave." This, Mu Tian swallowed a mouthful of saliva and turned to look at Mu Jing. Sigh. With a sigh, Mu Jing gritted his teeth and said, "Fine, 900,000 saint stones. I'll give it to you. Wouldn't it have been better if you did this from the start?" Lin Yi raised his eyebrows and waved his hand. Shen Qingyun dispersed the force and stabbed the long saber in her hand into the ground, leaning on the saber. The corner of Mu Jing's mouth twitched a few times. He sized up Lin Yi and Shen Qingyun. After confirming that he was no match for them, he could only wave his hand helplessly and take out a storage ring from his waist. Seeing this scene, the surrounding crowd all sucked in a breath of cold air and were extremely shocked. They could not believe that the great Mu family would succumb to the hands of 2 young people. Crackle! Crackle! Boom! Boom! All of a sudden, dark clouds gathered in the sky and pressed down on them. Violent lightning flashed and struck down, bringing with it streaks of electric light one after another. Feeling the violent power of the lightning, Mu Jing's body froze. Then, a crazed look appeared on his face. "Ha ha ha, the experts of the Thunderclap sect are here. I'd like to see if you can still be so arrogant." Lin Yi and Shen Qingyun's faces darkened, and anger burned in their hearts. Crackle! Crackle! The lightning struck, and a few figures landed beside Mu Jing and the others. The light blue lightning flashed and shone on the few figures, making them look like gods. The surging saint aura, mixed with the violent aura of lightning, filled the entire space and shocked everyone present. The invincible Great Sage! Gosh, the Mu family can even invite the invincible Great Sage? End of chapter. Chapter 743. The invincible great sage was one of the top elites in the desolate god realm. As for the heavenly sage elites, they were legendary existences. The great barren city was not considered powerful in the desolate god realm. Hence, it was shocking that there were two invincible great sage. Lin Yi and Shen Qingyun looked at each other and raised their eyebrows. They did not expect that there would be two invincible great sage. Although the invincible great sage in the desolate god realm was not as powerful as the geniuses from the other four domains, it would be difficult for them to defeat them in a short period of time. Those who could break through to the invincible great sage realm were all exceptional talent. Ha ha! Su Tianjing and you two little guys, I would like to see how you are going to blackmail the Mu family. With reinforcements, Mu Jing became excited and laughed out loud. Upon hearing this, Lin Yi glanced at Mu Jing and said softly, "Do you really think that you can be saved by inviting two stinky fishes and shrimps?" Stinky fishes and shrimps? Kid, what did you say? Upon hearing this, the two men from the Thunderclap sect turned pale and stared at Lin Yi fiercely. Initially, they wanted to mock Mu Jing for being stumped by the two little guys. However, they were now angered by Lin Yi and only wanted to humiliate Lin Yi. These two guys, the corners of Su Tianjing and Zhang Yongming's mouths twitched. They had originally wanted to speak nicely with the Thunderclap sect, but they hadn't expected that Lin Ye's words would offend them so badly. Phew, you want to stand up for the Mu family? Lin Ye's expression did not change and he said calmly, "If you are sure, don't regret it." What a joke, little guy, you are the first person who dares to speak to me like this. Damn it, Han Tong, don't waste your breath on this kid. Let's capture him first. When the two great sage saw that Lin Yi dared to talk to them like that, they were immediately enraged. They raised their hands and hundreds of blue thunderbolts burst forth, blasting towards Lin Yi. "If you want to bully my junior brother, you'll have to get through me first." The next moment, Shen Qingyun raised her hand, picked up the long sword in her hand, and ran towards Shocking Thunder. Shwa! The sharp saber light swept across. The ice-cold saber intent was like a sharp ice blade, instantly slicing apart the lightning. In the next moment, Shen Qingyun brandished her long saber. The violent saber chi danced wildly and enveloped the invincible great sage. Bang bang bang! Thunder rumbled and saber chi danced wildly. The battle between the two of them formed a ball of light that flew high into the sky. Seeing this scene, the other invincible great sage couldn't help but be stunned. What's going on? Shen Qingyun looked like she was only at the initial stage of the great sage. How could she erupt with such tyrannical power and stall his friend? The gap between each stage of the great sage was like a natural chasm. Normally, 10 great sage at the initial stage wouldn't be a match for 1 great sage at the intermediate stage. But now, Shen Qingyun displayed strength that exceeded her by several stages, which surprised him. The strength of almost an entire stage. Could it be that they are geniuses from the 4 domains? Han Tong's eyes spun as a possibility suddenly appeared in his mind. In an instant, his face turned incomparably pale. Although the desolate god realm didn't belong to the 4 domains, if they offended the geniuses from the 4 domains, they would still die miserably. Thinking up to here, Han Tong saw Lin Yi slowly walking towards him and immediately panicked immensely, hurriedly shouting, "Who are you?" Raising his eyebrows, Lin Yi curled his lips and said in a low voice, "Want to test our identity? It's too late. Anyone who provokes us will have to pay the price." As soon as his voice fell, Lin Ye's figure flashed and instantly arrived in front of Han Tong. His left hand formed a fist, and his right index finger suddenly pointed out. Celestial Emperor Fist. Sky-destroying finger. The violent fist momentum and sharp finger wind hit Han Tong's body with a loud bang. Bang! Han Tong only felt pain in his chest, as if there was a giant hammer hammering him. He was immediately sent flying. His internal organs were tumbling violently. The pain was like a tide, constantly invading his sea of consciousness. Damn it, you're only at the invincible sage realm. How can you have such strong strength? Han Tong's face changed drastically. He was sure that Lin Yi, Shen Qingyun, and the others' identities were definitely not ordinary. But at this time, they had already started fighting. Even if he admitted defeat, there was no way. Clenching his teeth, Han Tong did not think anymore. Flipping his hands, icy blue lightning bloomed, immediately enveloping his entire person. Thunderclap roar. Both fists swept out and suddenly blasted out. The next moment, violent lightning rolled out like a wave, smashing toward Lin Yi. Buzz. Lin Yi's expression did not change. Raising his right hand lightly, his index finger sketched in the air. Several divine inscriptions appeared. A strange power rippled, suddenly freezing the lightning that filled the sky. Space seal, slow, elemental annihilation, and other divine inscriptions appeared at the same time. The next moment, the lightning that filled the sky dissipated. What? How is this possible? Seeing this scene, Han Tong's entire person was dumbstruck, not daring to believe his eyes. Not to mention him, everyone in the field was stunned. They had never seen the power of divine inscriptions before. They were stunned on the spot, their hearts full of shock. Even Qing Yu was stunned. Others did not recognize the power of divine inscriptions and mistakenly thought that it was Lin Yi's domain or some other power. But she recognized it. How is this possible? Divine inscriptions aren't the cultivation methods of the people of Sky Market World? How can Lin Yi possibly display it? Qing Yu's mouth was slightly agape as she suddenly recalled what Lin Yi had said earlier. She was completely astonished. When she looked at Lin Yi again, her gaze was extremely strange. If it was said that Qing Yu still wanted to compete with Lin Yi previously, following this period of contact, Qing Yu already lost this thought. Lin Yi's performance was seriously too dazzling, making her feel ashamed of her inferiority. Damn it, I don't believe that a mere invincible saint can overturn the heavens. Shaking his head violently, Han Tong reacted. Raising both hands, a scepter appeared, flickering with lightning light. Ha! Lightning God's scepter. Lightning raging prison. Amidst the hoarse roar, endless lightning burst out from within the scepter, turning into a giant dragon, roaring and charging toward Lin Yi. Too weak. With a sigh, Lin Yi's heart moved slightly, and countless divine inscriptions appeared on the surface of his body. Divine power, demon destruction, petrification, demon exorcism, and other enhancement divine inscriptions erupted at the same time. In an instant, Lin Yi only felt that his right hand was filled with violent power, like a volcano that was about to erupt. Taking a deep breath, Lin Yi's figure rushed forward. Facing the violent lightning dragon's attack, he actually did not dodge or evade. Under the extremely shocked gazes of the spectators, he crashed into it with a loud bang. End of chapter. Chapter 744. Boom! His right fist glowed with the light of the divine runes as it collided with the dark blue lightning dragon. In the next moment, a violent energy rippled out from the center of the collision. The strong wind howled as the entire Mu family was swept up by the violent wind. Almost instantly, the onlookers, including the people from the animal battle arena and Qing Yu, were sent flying. They could only feel the turbulence in their bodies. What a powerful energy! Feeling that violent energy, the surrounding crowd felt a lingering fear in their hearts, and their expressions changed drastically. Bang! A loud sound was heard again. A figure flew out from the center of the impact and landed heavily on the ground, causing dust to splatter. Hiss! The sound of people sucking in cold air continuously rang out. The surrounding crowd focused their attention, and their expressions were incomparably strange. Although Lin Yi's cultivation level was very low, they had a premonition that the person who was sent flying was most likely from the Thunderclap sect. As the dust settled, the figure quietly appeared before the onlookers. As expected, the person whose clothes were torn and who was lying on the ground was Han Tong. The onlookers slowly lifted their heads and saw Lin Yi floating in the air with the divine runes around him. He was like a deity as he looked coldly at Han Tong. Seeing that Han Tong had completely lost his ability to resist, Lin Yi nodded slightly. He was satisfied with the power of the divine runes. Although the power of a single divine inscription wasn't very strong, when dozens or even hundreds of divine inscriptions were used together, the power of the divine inscriptions was shocking. Lin Yi was confident that with the power of the divine runes, divine thought power, and saint power, even if he encountered the genius disciples of the 4 major sects in the 4 major regions, he would not be too weak. Rumble. Dazzling saber dance. Suddenly, there was a sharp cry in the sky. Looking up, there were hundreds of icy blue saber chi dancing wildly like dancing snowflakes. It was extremely beautiful. However, within the beauty, there was a strong murderous intent. Bang! A figure flew out heavily. His clothes were torn and his skin was cut by the saber chi. Blood flowed out and in an instant, he was covered in blood. How is this possible? Seeing this scene, Mu Jing, Mu Tian and the others were stunned. They were originally excited that the people from the Thunderclap sect had come, so they would not be in any danger. Who would have thought that the 2 invincible great sage of the Thunderclap sect would be defeated in such a miserable manner? For a moment, Mu Jing, Mu Tian, and the others staggered back a few steps, ready to escape at any moment. Mu Jing felt extremely bitter in his heart. If he had known that Lin Yi and Shen Qingyun were so abnormal and could actually fight across realms, he would have rather handed over those saint stones. Although 900,000 saint stones wasn't a small sum, it was nothing to them. Senior sister, what should we do with these 2 fellows? Lin Yi yawned and put away the divine runes that were hovering around him. Shen Qingyun slowly descended from the sky. Her face was calm and there was not even a single drop of sweat on her forehead. Seeing this scene, the crowd couldn't help but be shocked. Defeating 2 invincible great sage was already shocking enough. What shocked them even more was that Lin Yi and Shen Qingyun did not even break out in a sweat. Their faces were calm, as if they had not unleashed their full strength. Gulp, how terrifying! Who are they? The sound of people swallowing their saliva could be heard. The crowd kept guessing the identities of Lin Yi and Shen Qingyun. In their minds, even the geniuses of the 4 major domains would not have such combat strength. Oh, Shen Qingyun put away her long sword and glanced at the 2 from the Thunderclap sect. Her eyes suddenly flashed with a cunning look. These 2 fellows don't know what's going on. How dare they help others? Since they want to help others so much, let's chop off their hands. Let's see if they still dare to not distinguish right from wrong in the future. All right. As soon as he finished speaking, Lin Yi raised his right hand. Blazing flames appeared and the sky sword 12 styles exploded. One sword light chills 19 states. In a flash, a sharp sword chi suddenly appeared from within the blazing flames. At the same time, many divine runes rippled and mixed with the sword chi. In an instant, they swept past the right hands of the 2 from the Thunderclap sect. Mournful cries rang out. The intense pain caused the 2 people who were still unconscious to wake up. When they looked down, their faces turned pale and they were filled with regret. If they had known, they would not have helped Mu Jing. In the end, not only did they not reap any benefits, but their arms were also chopped off. Enduring the pain, the 2 from the Thunderclap sect clutched their broken arms and stared at Lin Yi and Shen Qingyun. Who are you? The 2 from the Thunderclap sect trembled and asked through gritted teeth. Shen Qingyun sneered. Just as she was about to answer, she was interrupted by Lin Yi. Shen Qingyun stuck out her tongue and quickly shut her mouth. She just remembered that she had come to the desolate god realm for the 5 spiritual gods' relic. She could not rashly reveal her identity. Otherwise, there was no guarantee that the disciples of the other three factions would not attack them. You are not qualified to know who we are, Lin Yi said indifferently. The Mu family owes us holy stones, but you want to cover for them. Well, this is your punishment. Get lost. Since I am in a good mood, I will not kill you. You win. Clenching their teeth, the two men from the Thunderclap sect glared viciously at Lin Yi. Soon after, they ignored everyone else as they swiftly turned around, transformed into thunderbolts, and sped off into the distance. Junior brother Lin, it seems that they are not convinced. Shin Qingyun suddenly grinned and said, "Why don't you take some time to visit their sect? I remember that you seem to be practicing lightning-related cultivation techniques. Maybe you can find something useful in their sect." Forget it. It has nothing to do with them. Lin Yi shook his head and smiled. If they are stubborn and want to go against us again, we will punish them. Well, next, it is time to collect the holy stones that I have won. The corners of Shin Qingyun's mouth curled up. With a flash, she appeared before Mu Jing and Mu Tian. You don't come over. Suddenly seeing Shin Qingyun, Mu Tian's heart was filled with fear. She actually sat down on the ground with a face full of shock. Mu Tian did not expect that Shin Qingyun, who he just wanted to get to know, would have such terrifying strength. If he could go back in time, he definitely wouldn't try to get close to Shin Qingyun. You don't have to be afraid. I am not an unreasonable person. Shin Qingyun revealed two small canine teeth and smiled brightly. As long as you hand over the holy stones that you have lost to me, I will not attack you. Okay, here are the holy stones. Hearing this, Mu Jing heaved a sigh of relief and quickly threw out a storage ring. There are 2 million holy stones and treasures worth 1 million holy stones in this ring. It should be enough for the bet. Not enough? How can this be enough? Shin Qingyun smiled. You have owed me for so long. I should at least collect some interest. End of chapter. Chapter 745. Collect some interest? The corners of Mu Jing and Mu Tian's mouths twitched violently. They owed you 900,000 saint stones. If they collected some interest, it would be more than 1 million saint stones. They had already given you more than 3 million saint stones, and you were still not satisfied? Of course. Shin Qingyun tilted her head and looked at Mu Tian. If I kill your precious son, I wonder if you will still have a son. Mu Jing took a deep breath and did not dare to resist. He gritted his teeth and threw out a storage ring. There are 5 million saint stones in this ring. There are also many cultivation techniques and treasures. They are definitely worth more than 2 million saint stones. Mu Jing's heart was bleeding as he looked at the storage ring floating in the air. They only earned 20 million saint stones in a year. After deducting the family's operating expenses, they could only use less than 10 million saint stones. But now they had given it all away. Oh, seeing that you are sincere in your apology, I will forgive you. After taking the storage ring, Shin Qingyun smiled with satisfaction. In fact, if Mu Tian and the rest had not cheated, Shin Qingyun would not have asked for more. She had won 900,000 saint stones, so it was 900,000 saint stones. Although Cebu Gakuin was powerful, they would not bully others. But Mu Tian and the rest broke the rules first. Shin Qingyun naturally had to punish them. If Lin Yi was not around and she was not in a good mood, the Mu family would not exist anymore. Oh yes, your son really used underhanded means. Lin Yi also landed and glanced at Mu Jing. He said indifferently, but that is between you and the animal fighting arena. After that, Lin Yi and Shin Qingyun looked at each other and turned to walk toward Qinyu. They walked out of the Mu family. The three of you, please wait. Seeing this, Su Tianjing hurriedly shouted. He wanted to stop Lin Yi and the rest. What kind of joke was this? To be able to have such talent, one could see the power behind them. If he could establish a connection with them, perhaps they would be able to soar. Therefore, Su Tianjing did not want to miss this opportunity. However, Lin Yi and Shen Qingyun could not be bothered to waste time with them. Their figures flashed as they sped away. Although their cultivation levels were weak, their strength was not weak. Even Su Tianjing was unable to catch up to them. He could only sigh and vent all his anger on Mu Jing and Mu Tian. Outside the great desolation city, Lin Yi and the other two sat cross-legged on the ground. Countless treasures were scattered all over the ground. Aren't they too weak? They actually have so few saint-rank treasures? Most of them are materials that are useless to us. After flipping through for a while, Lin Yi and the others were disappointed. The items in the two storage rings were of no use to them other than exchanging them for holy stones. What should we do next? Lin Yi glanced at Shen Qingyun and asked, "Have you had enough fun? Next, we should look for the 5 spiritual god relics." Can we play for a while longer? Shen Qingyun blinked and suddenly hugged Lin Ye's arm. She giggled and said, "I once heard from Sister Xuanji that there is an interesting place in the Cloud Sand City. That place can increase the power of divine senses." "Oh? Increase the power of divine senses?" Upon hearing this, Lin Yi and Qin Yu exclaimed in surprise. Qin Yu even ignored Shen Qingyun, who was holding Lin Ye's arm, and asked in a low voice, "Where is it? How much does it increase the power of divine senses?" "The divine senses heavenly steel." Shen Qingyun smiled and said, "According to Sister Xuanji, the divine senses heavenly steel is an independent space. There is an endless amount of divine senses in it. The longer one can stay in it, or the more space one can pass through, the greater the reward at the end of the trial." Previously, Sister Xuanji persevered for a day and a night. When she came out, her divine senses increased from level 60 to level 62. TSK. So terrifying? The corners of their mouths twitched. Lin Yi and Qin Yu looked at each other. They were both shocked, and their eyes were filled with desire. It was harder to increase the power of divine senses as one progressed. Ever since they reached level 60, their progress had stagnated and they could not make any further progress. Fairy Xuanji had only persevered for a day and a night, and she had already made such progress. Perhaps they could also give it a try. After all, the 5 spiritual gods' relics were fought over by the geniuses of the 4 major domains. Those geniuses were much stronger than the Great Sage at the Peak and the Great Sage at the Invincible Realm. To put it bluntly, ordinary people, no matter how talented they were, would not be a match for the geniuses of the 4 major domains. The cultivation techniques and martial techniques they practiced were too low level, and they could not unleash their full power. Therefore, although Lin Yi and the rest could easily defeat the ordinary Invincible Realm Great Sage, it was still very difficult for them to contend with the geniuses of the 4 major domains. Sister Xuanji said that the divine will heavenly steel is fun. I want to give it a try. Shen Qingyun looked at Lin Yi with her big watery eyes and asked, "Do you want to go?" "Okay, let's rest for a while. We'll go tomorrow." Looking up at the sky, it was already night time. Lin Yi was too lazy to hurry. "Okay." Upon hearing this, Shen Qingyun could not help but laugh. Suddenly, she seemed to have thought of something. She quickly patted Lin Ye's shoulder and asked, "Junior brother Lin, I saw a small tiger with wings suddenly appear on your shoulder, but it disappeared after that. What was that?" "I was dealing with other things at that time and I almost forgot about it." "What was that?" "I thought it would be fun." "Fun?" Upon hearing this, Lin Yi could not help but twitch the corners of his mouth. How could the auspicious sign of a mainland become something fun in your mouth? Lin Yi rolled his eyes and hesitated for a moment. In the end, he decided not to hide it from Shen Qingyun. With a slight thought, he summoned the auspicious sign. Ao Wu! As soon as the auspicious sign appeared, it roared. Then, it glanced at Shen Qingyun and Qin Yue and blinked its eyes. "Wow, what a cute little tiger!" Shen Qingyun's eyes lit up and she grabbed the auspicious sign with both her hands. Meow. However, before Shen Qingyun could grab the auspicious sign meowed and pounced into Shen Qingyun's arms. Coincidentally, it landed on a ball of softness. Shen Qingyun instantly laughed and stroked the auspicious sign. She was elated. The auspicious sign laid on Shen Qingyun's chest. It retracted its wings and rested its paws on Shen Qingyun's chest. Upon seeing this, Lin Yi could not help but twitch the corners of his mouth. Is this your pet with intelligence? What's its name? After stroking the auspicious sign for a while, Shen Qingyun asked. Yes, it's a strange cat. Lin Yi grinned and said, It's not a little tiger, but a cat. A cat with wings? Blinking her eyes, Shen Qingyun was also very surprised. She had seen many forms of tigers, but it was the first time she saw an ordinary cat with wings. However, Shen Qingyun's attention was quickly diverted. What did you call it? A strange cat? Pfft, it's so cute, how could you treat it like this? End of chapter. Chapter 746. Perhaps because the cat was too cute, Shen Qingyun was quite friendly to it. Not only did she seek justice for it, she even gave it a name, Xiao Shui. This made the corner of Lin Ye's mouth twitch. If he wasn't mistaken, this strange cat was a male. Being called Xiao Shui, no matter how he looked at it, it was very strange. Even the strange cat waved its claws in protest when it heard that name. However, Shen Qingyun didn't understand the cat's meaning. She immediately decided on the name. After confirming the name, the cat suddenly lost its spirit. Its ears drooped and it looked at Lin Yi pitifully. However, Lin Yi acted as if he didn't see it and let Shen Qingyun play with Xiao Shui. Xiao Shui was in complete despair. Oh right. After a long while, Shen Qingyun suddenly asked, This cat can't be the egg we got earlier, right? You're so smart? Lin Yi smiled and said, Yes, that egg hatched. It can't be? This time around, it wasn't just Shen Qingyun. Even Qinyue was astonished. She exclaimed, I remember that the egg was obtained from the Thunder Windchaser tiger's stomach. Shouldn't it be a baby tiger? How did it become a cat? It might be a mutation. Lin Yi laughed bitterly. I'm also puzzled, but it's really a cat. However, it can't be considered a cat. It can only be considered a new type of mutated demon beast. How's its strength? Lin Yi shrugged. I haven't tested it, but it doesn't look too weak. With my current strength, a spiritual pet won't be of much use. It's fine as long as it's cute. Shen Qingyun chuckled and immediately pinched Xiao Shui's skin again. Lin Yi couldn't be bothered to care about Xiao Shui. He looked at it in despair, but he could feel that Xiao Shui was very happy in its heart. Lin Yi didn't recall Xiao Shui and let Shen Qingyun bully Xiao Shui. The divine rune appeared and sealed the space around the three of them. Lin Yi sat cross-legged and began to recover his divine will. Although he had already successfully cultivated the divine inscriptions, he still had to expend his spiritual sense to use them. The next day, after a night of cultivation, Lin Yi and Shen Qingyun both recovered to their peak condition. After resting for a while, Shen Qingyun led Lin Yi and Qinyue to the Cloud Sand City. The divine will heavenly steel that could increase one's divine will was very attractive to Lin Yi and Qinyu. In Qinyun, Qinyue, Qinyue, and Qinyue, Qinyun, and Qinyun. However, Lin Yi sensed that the people in the Cloud Sand City were much stronger than those in the Great Barren City. Many people in the Great Sage Realm were walking on the street. These people are all here for the divine will heavenly steel? Lin Yi was surprised. It seemed that the divine will heavenly steel's effect was extraordinary to be able to attract so many people. Of course. Shen Qingyun grinned and said, the people from the other 4 regions shouldn't be here yet. Otherwise, there would be a lot of people here. The 4 forces have an agreement. Under normal circumstances, we can't casually fight. Sometimes we rely on these things to determine the winner. I still remember that 5 years ago, Sister Xian Ji defeated the geniuses from the other forces and won first place. It's a pity that she was third on the overall ranking. She didn't surpass the 2 freaks from the Holy Moon Divine Sect and the Divine Sky Sect. At this point, Shen Qingyun glanced at Lin Yi and smiled. Junior brother Lin, you have to work hard and get first place on the Divine Will Heavenly Steel. Pfft, you think too highly of me, Lin Yi said modestly. This is my first time here. How can I surpass those people in one go? Actually, the reason why I brought you here is to experience the Divine Will Heavenly Steel. Shen Qingyun stuck out her tongue and said with a chuckle, the Divine Will Heavenly Steel can only be entered twice every 10 years. Under normal circumstances, everyone will gather here after most of the people have arrived. At the same time, the 4 forces will compete. You can experience it first. Then, when the competition starts, you will have an advantage. So that's what you're thinking. The corner of Lin Ye's mouth twitched as he glanced at Shen Qingyun. Phew, this means that after some time, when the people from the 4 forces arrive, everyone will gather in the Cloud Sand City? That's right. Shen Qingyun nodded. Even if it's not in the Cloud Sand City, it will be near here. After experiencing the Divine Will Heavenly Steel, let's move around here. Let's look for the 5 spiritual god relics and see if we can find anything interesting. Lin Yi rubbed his nose and said softly, if we are too far away, we might not even know when the 5 spiritual god relics are opened. Okay. Since it was related to the 5 spiritual god relics, Shen Qingyun didn't say much and agreed immediately. As they spoke, Lin Yi and the rest arrived at a big road. A huge stone steel entered the eyes of Lin Yi and the rest. Lin Yi and the rest shuddered as they involuntarily stopped in their track. Shaking his head, Lin Yi frowned as he looked at the huge stone steel and asked, is that the Divine Will Heavenly Steel? As far as the eye could see, dozens of figures could be seen slowly walking towards the stone steel. Turning his head, he saw that Qin Yu's eyes were blurred and she seemed to have yet to wake up. Shen Qingyun patted Qin Yu and said to Lin Yi, that's right, this is the Divine Will Heavenly Steel. Phew, if you are not strong enough, you won't even be able to enter the Divine Will Heavenly Steel. Hiss, feeling the Divine Will pressure that filled the road, Lin Yi was curious. Before he walked on the road, he didn't feel any Divine Will pressure. This showed how powerful the Divine Will pressure was to be able to control its power so exquisitely. Qin Yu woke up quickly and looked at the Divine Will Heavenly Steel with a burning gaze. Her talent wasn't weak, and she could naturally feel the Divine Will power. If that's all, it can't stop me. Curling his lips, Lin Ye's shoulders shook as he took a step forward and rushed towards the Divine Will Heavenly Steel. Releasing the Divine Will power in his body, the pressure didn't cause any hindrance to Lin Yi. In just a few breaths, Lin Yi overtook the people in front of him and walked to the Divine Will Heavenly Steel. Seeing this scene, the corners of Shen Qingyun's mouth curled up, revealing a smile. Xiao Shui, let's go. Pinching Xiao Shui's chubby face, Shen Qingyun released her saber intent and cut the Divine Will power apart. She also walked towards the Divine Will Heavenly Steel. Lin Yi looked at Shen Qingyun and couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Even he could feel the sharpness of the saber intent. As soon as they arrived at the stone tablet, Lin Yi was just about to receive Shen Qingyun when a figure flashed in front of him like a bolt of lightning. Junior Sister Shen, I guessed right. You're here. End of chapter. Chapter 747. Junior Sister Shen, I guessed right. You will come here. With a chuckle, a figure passed by Lin Yi and landed in front of Shen Qingyun. Raising his eyebrows, Lin Yi suddenly stopped and looked up. He saw a young man in blue holding a bright red flower in his hand and offering it to Shen Qingyun. In a split second, Lin Yi's expression was very strange. What a joke! In the inner yard, Shin Qingyun was a little witch. How could there be someone who liked her? Shin Qingyun blinked and looked at the young man in blue. Junior sister Shin, this is the blood soul flower. It can enhance the power of blood and strengthen the body. The young man in blue happily handed the bright red flower to Shin Qingyun and said shyly, I see that you use a long knife. You should need this kind of sacred medicine. May I ask who you are? Shin Qingyun stuck out her tongue and said, Sorry, I don't know you. I can't take your things. Crack. A crisp sound suddenly sounded, and the young man in blue's face gradually froze. Lin Ye's mouth couldn't help but twitch. Although he couldn't see the young man in blue, he could imagine his face. The person he liked and pursued didn't know him. How sad would that be? Shin Qingyun smiled faintly and walked past the blue-clothed youth to stand in front of Lin Yi. Lin Yi glanced at Shin Qingyun, but his eyelids suddenly jumped. Shin Qingyun almost couldn't hold back the smile on her face. Lin Yi immediately realized that Shin Qingyun did it on purpose. She knew the young man in blue and said it deliberately. This girl is really naughty. Shaking his head with a bitter smile, Lin Yi thought, she is indeed the little witch of the inner yard. However, it could be seen that Shin Qingyun didn't have any feelings for the young man in blue. Otherwise, she wouldn't have done it. Cough cough. After a long time, the blue-clothed youth coughed awkwardly and sighed. He turned to look at Shin Qingyun and said, Junior sister Shin, you really know how to joke. Are you kidding me? I, Lan Yeheo, am one of the 13 candidates for the position of palace leader. Even in the entire inner domain, I am considered one of the top disciples. How could Shin Qingyun not know him? Lan Yeheo stared at Lin Yi, who was standing beside Shin Qingyun, and a sense of crisis suddenly emerged in his heart. He quickly said, Junior sister, who is this little brother? Why haven't I seen him before? Hello, senior. Lin Yi chuckled and said, I'm a disciple of the outer yard, and I happen to be allowed to participate in the 5 spirits god relic this time. I see. Lan Yeheo nodded slightly, but his heart was still filled with a sense of crisis. He always felt that the relationship between Lin Yi and Shin Qingyun was unusual. However, on second thought, Shin Qingyun was already in the Great Sage realm, and her strength was comparable to the invincible Great Sage. It was impossible for her to be interested in an outer yard disciple. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. Hello, senior. All of a sudden, another crisp voice rang out. Lan Yeheo's expression changed slightly. He turned around and after seeing Qinyue, his expression changed slightly. This junior sister is also from the outer yard? Lan Yeheo frowned slightly and suddenly exclaimed, What's going on? Both of you are only sages. Why did the elders allow you to come out? Although Lan Yeheo and the others weren't in the academy previously, the elders had already informed them of the purpose of this trip. They all understood the danger of this trip. Therefore, when they saw Lin Yi and Qinyue from the outer yard, they were extremely surprised. Anyway, the elders allowed them to come. Shin Qingyun blinked and asked, Senior Lan, what are you waiting for here for? If you're just here to give me herbs, then forget it. Cough cough, Lan Yeheo said awkwardly. I wanted to improve my divine will. I happened to find the blood soul flower on the way, so I thought of bringing it over for you. Thank you, senior. However, I've been cultivating with Elder Theta Scarabii for a period of time, and my physique is already at its limit. This type of sacred medicine is useless to me. Therefore, I can't accept it. Shin Qingyun smiled and rejected Lan Yeheo. The corner of Lan Yeheo's mouth twitched. He could only sigh and say, All right then. Junior brother Lin, let's go play in the divine will sky steel. Shin Qingyun carried little Snow in one hand and held Lin Yi in the other as they walked towards the divine will sky steel. Me? Seeing this, Lan Yeheo was stunned. He looked at the backs of Lin Yi and Shin Qingyun in shock. He had just let go of his guard against Lin Yi, but Shin Qingyun had slapped him in the face. Sigh, Sensing the change in Lan Yeheo's expression, Qin Yu sighed and followed them again. Looking at Lin Yi and Shin Qingyun, Qin Yu couldn't help but curse them in her heart. The closer they got to the divine will sky steel, the stronger the divine will pressure. Even she had to walk slowly. Unexpectedly, Lin Yi and Shin Qingyun weren't restrained at all. The divine will sky steel towered into the clouds. In front of the steel, there was a 3-foot-tall stone wall with many names carved on it. Junior brother Lin, this is the divine will sky steel. Sister Xuanji is in 3rd place. Shin Qingyun pointed at the divine will sky steel and said, "You can only enter this steel if you can last for 10 hours or pass 10 stages. The requirements are so high." Lin Yi frowned and looked around. He was surprised to find that there were hundreds of names on the steel. This made him extremely shocked. 5 years ago, Fairy Xuanji had been able to fight her way into the top 3. This showed just how powerful she was. Fairy Xuanji's current strength might not be weaker than a heavenly sage realm elder. 5 years ago, her divine willpower was at level 62. Her current strength was at least level 64. Perhaps she had already reached level 65. The name in 2nd place was a woman, Helian Yuan. Lin Yi was speechless. Could it be that among the geniuses of the 4 major domains, there were only women who stood out? Luckily, the 1st place was a man named Yun Feng. For some reason, Lin Yi felt a special fluctuation in his heart when he saw Yun Feng's name. When there are enough people, you can enter the divine will sky steel. Seeing that Lin Yi had finished looking at the steel, Shin Qingyun pulled Lin Yi to the side and sat down on a few futons at the front. Lin Yi looked around and realized that there were dozens of futons around. Each futon was shining brightly. At that moment there were already many people sitting on the futons, cultivating. Lan Yeheo walked over and sat beside Lin Yi. He said softly, "When there are enough people here, the divine will sky steel will activate and send you in. After the end of the trial, you will be rewarded according to your ranking. The higher your ranking, the better your reward." Legend has it that Yun Feng, the first person on the divine will sky steel, broke through from level 61 to level 65 after the trial. It was terrifying. End of chapter. Chapter 748. Lin Ye's mouth twitched as he looked at Shin Qingyun in shock. In the blink of an eye, she had broken through from level 61 to level 65. How heaven-defying was that? Sensing Lin Ye's shock and disbelief, Shin Qingyun nodded slightly and said in a low voice, "That's true. That rumored Yun Feng can be said to be abnormal to the extreme. I wonder if he's as strong in reality. But luckily, he's 10 years away from us. I'm afraid he's already a heavenly saint or absolute saint. He won't be with us." Hiss. If the rumors are true, then his talent is really amazing. Nodding slightly, Lin Yi couldn't help but be curious about Yun Feng. "Junior brother, if it's your first time entering the divine will heavenly steel, just familiarize yourself with it. After a while, when everyone else is here, you can go in for the second time," Lan Yeheo reminded. "Thank you, senior." Lin Yi smiled. As the saying goes, one doesn't hit a smiling person. Lan Yeheo was polite to him, so he couldn't say anything. "That's right, senior sister Shin, you didn't cultivate spiritual force, but you were able to enter?" Glancing at Shin Qingyun and seeing that she was still sitting on the futon, Lin Yi couldn't help but be curious. "Of course I can, but there's no reward and it's not on the list." Shin Qingyun smiled and said, "I'm here to play. The trials inside are strange and there are endless possibilities." Hearing this, Lin Ye's expression became strange. Lan Yeheo looked at Shin Qingyun in a daze. Realizing this, Lin Yi couldn't help but mourn for him. Hoping to sleep with a witch was pitiful enough. Hoping to sleep with a witch who didn't like him was even more despairing. If Lin Yi didn't have a suitable identity, he would have reminded Lan Yeheo to give up. From time to time, there were people who endured the divine will heavenly steel. Not long after, the futon was filled with people. Buzz. An invisible fluctuation quietly spread out, and suddenly enveloped Lin Yi and the others. Lan Yeheo whispered, "It's here. The two of you be careful. The spiritual will sky steel's test is quite difficult. Junior Sister Shun, you have to be careful as well. If you encounter difficulties, you can just give up." "Alright, I got it." Shin Qinyun rolled her eyes at Lan Yeheo and threw little snow to Lin Yi. She lightly smiled and said, "Junior apprentice brother Lin, take him with you. Maybe he can help you." After that, Shin Qinyun narrowed her eyes and waited for the test to begin. Crack! The crisp sound rang out again. Lan Yeheo almost spat out a mouthful of blood. His fragile heart of a young man was completely shattered. He asked Shin Qinyun out of kindness, but Shin Qinyun cared so much about Lin Yi, which made him jealous. A person who fell into jealousy was the devil, and a man who fell into jealousy was the devil of all devils. Seeing that Shin Qinyun closed her eyes, Lan Yeheo suddenly grabbed Lin Yi's hand. Feeling his wrist being grabbed, Lin Yi looked at Lan Yeheo curiously, only to see his eyes burning with passion. Suddenly, Lin Yi panicked. He quickly said, "Senior Lan, what are you doing? Even if Senior Sister Shun rejected you, you can't do anything to me." The corner of Lan Yeheo's mouth twitched. He gritted his teeth and said, "What are you thinking? I'm not interested in you." "Phew, that's good." Lin Yi let out a long sigh of relief. "You suddenly grabbed me, of course I would be nervous." Lan Yeheo took a deep breath and said in a low voice, "Kid, what's your relationship with Junior Sister Shin?" "Friends." Lin Yi blinked. "Like hell I'll believe you. You're such a bad old man. You're not telling the truth." Lan Yeheo gritted his teeth. He wanted to bite Lin Yi to death. What kind of joke was this? Ordinary friends could hold hands. Why would Shin Qinyun care so much about him? Lin Yi said gloomily, "I'm still young, senior brother. Senior Sister Shun and I are really just friends." "If you're just friends, then do you dare to make a bet with me?" Lan Yeheo's eyes flashed as he stared at Lin Yi. "Bet? What bet?" Lin Yi suddenly had an ominous feeling. Indeed, outside of the school, beauties were trouble. If Shin Qinyun and Lin Yi were really lovers, then it would be fine. However, they were really just friends. Now, Lin Yi had to take the blame. "Let's bet on this time's spiritual will sky steel. Let's see whose ranking is higher. If my ranking is high, then stay away from Junior Sister Shin in the future." Lan Yeheo gritted his teeth and said with a red face, "If your ranking is high, then I won't care about you." Lin Yi's expression gradually froze. He said in a low voice, "I'm sorry, senior brother. I can't agree to this bet." "Are you scared?" Lan Yeheo sneered, trying to provoke him. "No." Lin Yi shook his head and said, "Senior Sister Shun is my friend. She's not a bet. If you want to bet on something else, I'll keep you company. If it's this, then please forgive me for not being able to comply." After saying that, Lin Yi closed his eyes slightly. Lan Yeheo's body trembled violently as he stood rooted to the ground. His face was full of shame. However, Lin Yi and Lan Yeheo did not notice that Shin Qinyun, who had closed her eyes, had secretly curled her lips and revealed a smile. After a long while, Lan Yeheo pulled Lin Yi again and said in a low voice, "Let's not talk about the bet first. Anyway, it has nothing to do with Junior Sister Shin. Do you dare to bet with me? To be honest, I'm quite impressed by you. However, I still want to see how strong you are." "Oh." Hearing that, Lin Yi stared at Lan Yeheo. Seeing that his eyes were pure, he nodded and agreed. He smiled and said, "I'm happy to spar with senior brother. The spiritual will sky steel trial is about to begin. I'm looking forward to your performance." The corners of Lan Yeheo's mouth curled up. He closed his eyes and waited for the spiritual will sky steel to open. After chatting with Lin Yi for a while, he was able to solve several problems in his heart. He had a premonition that the spiritual will sky steel this time contained a great opportunity. Buzz, buzz, buzz. A strong spiritual will rippled. In the next moment, Lin Yi and the rest disappeared with a swoosh. In the entire space, there were only a few shining futons left. The sky and earth were spinning. Lin Yi only felt an excruciating pain in his head. When he woke up, he was already in a green forest. This is, shaking his head violently, Lin Yi looked around and could not help but be surprised. This is an illusion? No, this is a test of spiritual will. It shouldn't be an illusion. Frowning slightly, Lin Yi lifted his head and looked around. However, he was surprised to find that there was no exit in this area. As far as the eye could see, no matter which direction it was, there was an endless stretch of trees. Even the sky was formed by the leaves of the trees. Lin Yi was actually surrounded by trees. End of chapter. Chapter 749. What the hell is going on now? Frowning, Lin Yi was flabbergasted. Could it be that this stage required him to escape from this place? Walala! At this moment, a crisp sound rang out. Lin Yi looked up and saw that the lush green trees in the sky had extended countless branches and were trying to bind him. Not only in the air, but under his feet and around him, all the vines and branches were like flying snakes, rapidly rushing towards Lin Yi, trying to bind him. What's going on? His pupils shrank. Lin Yi was caught off guard and was directly bound by the numerous branches. In the next moment, the branches contracted tightly, tearing apart Lin Yi's body. They sank deep into his flesh and blood continuously seeped out. Intense pain, like a tidal wave, constantly attacked Lin Yi's nerves. Damn it, why are these branches so strong? Frowning, Lin Yi gritted his teeth. Divine runes appeared and instantly turned into flames, burning the branches that were binding him. Beep, beep, beep. The flames burned fiercely. In just a few breaths of time, the branches were already burning. However, they did not stop. They continued to bind Lin Yi tightly. As time passed, their power grew stronger and stronger. They even sank deep into Lin Yi's body. Noticing this, Lin Yi's expression changed drastically. If he allowed those branches to sink into his body, he would be finished. His bones, his meridians, and even his bones would collapse. Taking a deep breath, Lin Yi's shoulders shook and he activated the Annihilation Divine Dragon transformation. Roar! A loud dragon roar sounded. Lin Yi's body suddenly became much stronger. Those branches could no longer sink in and were stuck there. Immediately, the sky was filled with flames, burning the surrounding branches into a sea of fire. However, no matter how fierce the flames were, those branches did not break. In fact, even more branches wrapped around Lin Yi and surrounded him. After a dozen breaths, Lin Yi had become a person of branches. His entire body was wrapped in branches. The power of countless branches stacked together. Even though Lin Yi's body was strengthened by the Annihilation Divine Dragon transformation and the power of the divine runes, it still began to crack. He could not withstand it at all. After all, it was the combination of countless branches. No, I have to cut these branches. Gritting his teeth, Lin Yi's sword domain appeared. Endless sword chi and sword intent gathered and condensed into transparent small swords that filled the sky. Immediately, they whistled out and continuously slashed those branches. Since the flames can't burn you, I'll cut you with sharp sword chi. Poochie! Poochie! Sharp sword chi slashed the branches of the branches. The branches that had been burned by the flames were once again slashed by the sword chi. Instantly, countless cracks appeared. However, even so, they did not break. The power contained within them grew stronger and stronger, binding Lin Yi bitterly. Damn it, how can this be? Frowning, Lin Yi could not help but feel hopeless. Flames, divine telekinesis, divine runes, and even the sword domain were all useless. How can I pass this test? That's right, This is the test of the divine will, heavenly steel. In other words, there is no physical body. It is purely a test of divine will. These are all fake. Since I can't stop them, is this a test of my willpower? Thinking of this, Lin Yi took a deep breath and decided not to resist. The annihilation divine dragon transformation dissipated, the flames dissipated, and the sword domain collapsed. In an instant, countless branches increased their strength and bound Lin Yi, sinking into his flesh. An intense pain crazily attacked Lin Yi. Even though he had experienced countless hardships, his eyebrows were tightly knitted together. Crack! Crack! The crisp sound continued to ring. Lin Yi could clearly feel that his bones were breaking. However, his expression did not change. There was only one thought in his mind. I can endure this, I will not die. This level of pain is not enough to make me, Lin Yi, submit. With this thought in mind, the branches continued to exert more strength. However, Lin Yi gradually felt no pain. After a while, Lin Yi felt a cool aura. Looking down, he saw that the branches that were binding him had turned into countless emerald green life force and flowed into his body. In an instant, the power in Lin Ye's body, whether it was saint energy, divine runes, or divine will, all of them were greatly enhanced. My physical body seems to be real. The corners of Lin Ye's mouth twitched. It was only now that he discovered that in this mysterious space, his mortal body actually existed. This meant that if something happened to his physical body, it would not be healed when he got out. This made him scared. If he did not hold back just now, he would be finished. Fortunately, he made it through. Not only was he not injured, but his body was also strengthened. Buzz buzz buzz. After all the life force entered Lin Ye's body, the surrounding scenery gradually changed. After 2 breaths of time, Lin Yi was already on top of a lone peak. The peak was very steep. There was only one person standing on it. If another person came, it might collapse and fall. Hiss, what kind of test is this? Touching his nose, Lin Yi was very surprised. What was the test for this stage? Lin Yi was sure that if he fell, he would have reached the end of this test. Looking down, the peak was so tall that it reached the clouds. At a glance, he could only see the vast clouds. It was extremely horrifying. Screech! A crisp sound rang, followed by the sound of wings flapping. Suddenly hearing this sound, Lin Ye's expression changed. He suddenly had an ominous premonition in his heart. Lifting his head to look, Lin Ye's face was deathly pale, and he almost could not hold back cursing, only to see that several hundred majestic goshawks were currently attacking Lin Yi with extreme speed. Sharp eagle claws flickered with a cold light, making people tremble in fear. The goshawks' claws were full of strength. Once Lin Yi was caught and knocked, he would fall off the peak uncontrollably. What a ruthless test! Gritting his teeth, Lin Yi did not dare to hold back anymore. His mind moved slightly, his right hand sketched divine marks, and his left hand punched out. The heavenly emperor fist erupted with a powerful force, stirring up a stream of air that surged out, but it slowed down those goshawks' flying speed considerably. In the next moment, many divine marks condensed and formed, erupting with a strange power. Gravity, slow, space restriction, seal, curse, and other divine marks erupted one after another. In an instant, the sky full of goshawks lost the power to fly. Amidst the screeching, they flapped their wings helplessly and fell into the bottomless abyss. End of chapter. Chapter 750. Ha ha ha! Seeing this scene, Lin Yi suddenly laughed out loud. If he didn't know about the divine veins, it might have been difficult for him to pass this test. However, the effect of the divine veins allowed him to pass through safely. After the first wave of goshawks ended, it was quiet for 15 minutes, as if to give Lin Yi time to rest. After 15 minutes, the screeching sound was heard again. This time, it wasn't goshawks, but a group of giant snakes with wings. Hiss! The giant python's body is very strong. Even if it doesn't hit anyone, it might hit the peak and I'll fall. This test is really scary. The corners of Lin Ye's mouth twitched. He couldn't help but curse under his breath. These tests were really too difficult. If one wanted to pass through, they would need to have special abilities or extremely strong spiritual sense to directly crush them. Then, one had to have willpower. Fortunately, Lin Ye's divine veins made a huge contribution in this test. So what if it was a giant python that could fly? Before it could even get close to Lin Yi, it was sent into the endless abyss by the divine veins. After the giant python, it was the flying dragon and the phoenix. The time interval also increased. It was clear that this test was still giving people a way out. As the last fire phoenix fell into the endless abyss, the peak under Lin Ye's feet shook and turned into a yellow light that surged into Lin Ye's body. A special force quietly took root and sprouted in Lin Ye's body. This force seems to have something to do with the toughness of the earth. Frowning, Lin Yi was curious. Could it be that the benefits of this test were also related to the 5 elements? But Shen Qinyun had said that Fairy Xuanji had passed 10 tests. If the 5 elements were the main factor, there couldn't be so many tests. Forget it, I'll know when I continue. Pursing his lips, Lin Yi waited for the yellow light to enter his body and the peak to dissipate. He was already on a plane. There wasn't much difficulty in this stage. It was just an endless amount of beasts and monsters attacking the forest without any pause. However, it was still useless against Lin Yi. An hour later, the demonic beast's strength had risen to the invincible saint realm. Lin Yi immediately unleashed all of his power. Divine inscriptions and divine consciousness erupted at the same time. The demonic beasts that filled the sky were turned into nothingness before they could even let out a miserable shriek. The plane dissipated once again. This time, an invisible force surged into Lin Ye's body, strengthening his divine sense. This stage could be said to be difficult, but it could also be said to be simple. If you had the ability to fight across realms, it would naturally be simple because the highest level of demonic beasts would be the same as you. If you didn't have the ability to fight across realms, even if you weren't beaten to death, you would be exhausted to death. However, Lin Ye's true strength far exceeded his cultivation level, which was why he was so relaxed. 5 breaths later, an endless blue light appeared and suddenly wrapped Lin Yi up. At the same time, the water surged. Looking around, Lin Yi was already in the deep sea. Buzz, buzz, swoosh. The water surged, and the strong water pressure immediately fixed Lin Yi in an area. In the next moment, many piranhas revealed their sharp teeth and pounced on Lin Yi. Hee, defense is my forte. The corners of Lin Ye's mouth curled up. He was not worried at all. With a slight thought, he outlined the divine inscriptions again. Seal, slow, space, gravity, and other divine inscriptions appeared. The endless piranhas were trapped and unable to move. They could only squeeze together and get stuck. In just a dozen breaths, the piranhas had piled up into a mountain. They were all stuck in the pile, constantly rubbing their teeth and showing off to Lin Yi. Tisk, these trials seem a little too simple? Shrugging his shoulders, Lin Yi could not help but sigh softly. It seemed that he would have the opportunity to directly enter the divine will sky steel in the first trial. With such a huge increase in ranking, he wondered how much his divine will power would increase. However, just as Lin Yi was fantasizing about increasing his divine will power, an invisible force quietly rippled out from the sea. Buzz. The strange force rippled out, and in the next moment, the divine inscriptions in front of Lin Yi disappeared with a bang. Boom, boom, boom. Without the suppression of the divine inscriptions, the piranhas suddenly surged and rushed towards Lin Yi. Their sharp teeth shone with a cold light. With a cry of surprise, Lin Yi did not dare to hesitate. He released his divine will power and instantly turned it into a water screen, enveloping him. Bang! Bang! In the next moment, countless piranhas crashed into the water screen. Even with Lin Ye's strong divine willpower, many cracks appeared on the water screen. Explode! With a slight change of expression, Lin Yi waved his hands and the divine willpower instantly turned into the lightning attribute, releasing a bright light. Boom! 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 The berserk power exploded and instantly sent all the piranhas flying away. However, a moment later, an endless number of piranhas rushed over. Frowning slightly, Lin Yi drew the divine inscriptions again. The divine inscriptions were quickly drawn, but what surprised Lin Yi was that there was no power in it. TSK. Could it be that the divine will Sky Steel sensed that the method was too crazy and removed the divine inscriptions? The corner of Lin Ye's mouth twitched, and he could not help but feel puzzled. Without the power of the divine inscriptions, it would take a lot more time to pass these trials. This round should be testing my defense. Taking a deep breath, Lin Yi waved his hands lightly and the divine willpower turned into a water screen again, protecting him. Being in the sea, only by turning the divine willpower into water could he borrow the power of the water to strengthen the defense of his divine willpower. Bang! 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 Not long after, countless piranhas rushed over and continuously hit the water screen. When there were only a few of them, the piranhas could not cause any damage to the water screen. When there were more of them, Lin Yi changed the attribute again and exploded with the power of thunder, blowing them all away. After tossing and turning a few times, the strength of the piranhas also gradually increased. Lin Yi, on the other hand, started to think seriously. He analyzed the difficulties of the previous rounds after removing the divine inscriptions, trying to understand the routines of these trials. In the first round, he did not use any of the three powers. Very obviously, it was testing his firm mind. In the second round, he was on a lonely peak and had to avoid the attacks of the bird. If there were no divine inscriptions, Lin Yi would have to use the divine willpower to accurately push away the birds that came close to him and prevent himself from being hit. In other words, he had to have precise control of the divine willpower. As everyone knew, the divine willpower had a wide range of target. In many cases, it was impossible to determine the target. However, if he mastered this method, not only would the target be more accurate, the power that was condensed together would also be stronger. The third round did not have anything fancy. It was testing the attacking power of the divine will. The fourth round was about defense. End of chapter. Chapter 751. Willpower, Divine Telekinesis, Precise Control, Attack, Defense. These trials can really train one's divine telekinesis. No wonder it can improve one's divine telekinesis so much. I wonder what other trials there will be. Squinting his eyes, Lin Yi stopped thinking about it and mobilized his divine telekinesis to block the attacks around him. 15 minutes later, as the last wave of piranhas was slapped away, the surrounding seawater turned into a rich divine telekinesis aura and surged into Lin Ye's body. The next moment, Lin Yi found himself in a room. Looking around, all he could see were stone walls. Silver-white light shone down from the sky, illuminating the entire space. Frowning, Lin Yi was about to fly up when he was surprised to find that this area was a no-fly zone. I can't fly? That means I can only fly in this room? What kind of trial is this time? After pondering for a while, Lin Yi focused and waited for the trial to come. Buzz. The divine telekinesis aura gathered, and a figure quietly appeared in front of Lin Yi. Looking up, the divine telekinesis aura formed a puppet. Its aura was turbulent, and its cultivation level was one level higher than Lin Yi's. Before Lin Yi could react, the puppet clenched one hand into a fist and the other into a palm and pounced on Lin Yi. Celestial Emperor Fist. Sky-destroying finger. Seeing the attack coming, Lin Yi instinctively raised his hand. The celestial emperor fist and sky-destroying finger exploded, and the surging saint power swept past like a dragon's roar. Buzz. However, the frightening power and finger shadows passed through the puppet without causing any damage. Noticing this, Lin Yi raised his eyebrows and immediately realized what was going on. This was the divine will steel. The so-called trial was naturally for divine telekinesis, and saint power could not be used. Previously, Lin Yi was able to use the power of the divine glyph, because the power of the divine glyph did not belong to this world. The divine will heavenly steel had never come into contact with it before. In addition, Lin Yi had fused the divine glyph with his divine will, so it did not detect it at first. This was why Lin Yi was able to use the divine glyph several times. However, as the power of the divine glyph was repeatedly used, the divine will heavenly steel noticed its abnormality and naturally suppressed it. Once he understood this, Lin Yi immediately withdrew his saint energy. As he retreated rapidly, he activated the elephant's divine skill. Roar! The surging divine sense gathered and suddenly turned into a huge tiger. It waved its sharp claws and pounced on the puppet. The gigantic tiger shone with a golden light that contained a sharp killing intent. The combination of the 5 spirits godly technique and the 10,000 godly technique was extremely powerful. Bang! The sharp claws struck the puppet's body and sent it flying. In the next moment, the giant tiger leaped up and opened its huge mouth. However, the puppet was not to be trifled with. It actually lowered its body, and in the instant it dodged the sharp tiger teeth, its right hand formed a fist and suddenly punched upward. Roar! With one punch, the divine sense that had gathered into the giant tiger became much more illusory. Immediately after, before the giant tiger could swing its claws, the puppet's body spun and violently kicked the giant tiger's abdomen. Bang! As the puppet kicked out with its leg that was imbued with spirit sense, the giant spirit sense tiger was shattered. Hiss! This is a killing technique. Lin Ye's eyes lit up and his breathing quickened. Although he had cultivated many martial arts and sword techniques to the peak, his killing techniques were not very strong. If this place could help him train his killing techniques, it would be a good thing. The corner of Lin Ye's mouth curled up. He dispersed the elephant's divine skill and only activated the 3,000 ways of heaven and God's attraction. At the same time, the puppet's right hand formed a palm and pushed horizontally towards Lin Ye's chest. Dang! Lin Ye's divine sense surged in his hands and immediately blocked the attack. However, the puppet's wrist turned and started to tremble. In the next moment, an endless stream of divine sense surged out and continuously hit Lin Ye's arms. Lin Yi suddenly felt a huge force coming towards him. He could not block it in time and was directly sent flying by the puppet. This is using the power of vibration to extend the power of one attack and attack multiple times? Although Lin Yi was sent flying, he was excited. He had a feeling that the puppet in this stage would bring him many surprises. However, the puppet did not give Lin Yi too much time to react. Once again, it rushed forward and continuously attacked Lin Yi. The puppet's cultivation level was originally 1 level higher than Lin Yi's. In addition, its killing techniques could be said to be superb. Lin Yi was actually at a disadvantage in the beginning. Fortunately, Lin Yi's true strength was more powerful. Although the puppet's cultivation level was 1 level higher than his, its strength was not as good as his and could not cause any specific damage to him. Lin Yi, on the other hand, used the puppet as a whetstone to hone his killing technique. After half an hour, Lin Ye's killing techniques finally caught up to the puppet. They were not weaker than the puppet's at all. However, he still could not fully master them. But by relying on his powerful strength, Lin Yi still managed to destroy the puppet with a single punch. Phew, this stage is about killing techniques. I wonder what the next stage will be. Touching his nose, Lin Yi was surprised to find that after the puppet was destroyed, there were no changes. Could it be that he had not passed this stage? The corner of Lin Ye's mouth twitched. He could not help but feel embarrassed. Buzz. Very quickly, the divine sense aura that was even stronger than before gathered and formed another puppet. However, this time, the puppet's cultivation level was 3 levels higher than Lin Ye's. Boom. As soon as the puppet appeared, it slid forward and violently punched Lin Yi in the face. Bang! The violent divine sense exploded and Lin Yi was immediately sent flying. He was stunned. This time, the puppet's strength was similar to his. Moreover, its speed, strength, and killing techniques were stronger than before. Without exception, Lin Yi was once again at a disadvantage. He could only improve his skills by taking a beating. This time, it took Lin Yi a full hour to hone his skills to the puppet's level. After another 15 minutes, the puppet was destroyed and turned into a sky full of divine sense aura. Like a river, it surged into Lin Ye's body. It's over. Slightly stunned, Lin Yi felt a little regretful. Although the puppet was very strong, it had also improved him greatly. Not to mention other things, just the killing techniques had benefited him greatly. The light flickered again. This time, the surrounding scene turned into a huge circular arena. Countless cages hung around, and inside each cage was a ferocious beast. Whether it was a wolf, a tiger, or a silver fox, they all stared at Lin Yi with a ferocious look. Their ferocious looks made Lin Yi tremble all over. Buzz. The aura of divine sense rippled, and a crisp sound rang out. The cages around all scattered, and the ferocious beasts inside fell out one after another. They were stunned at first, then immediately roared and quickly surrounded Lin Yi. Their sharp teeth flashed coldly, and their eyes were filled with cruelty and pride. End of chapter. Chapter 752. Roar! Roar! The beasts roared and dozens of giant beasts leaped up. Some extended their sharp claws, some opened their bloody mouths, and some gnashed their sharp teeth. All of them charged towards Lin Yi. Their bodies contained the power of countless divine sense. Their vigorous divine sense pressure was like a mountain, howling and howling. Feeling the pressure, Lin Ye's expression changed, and he could not help but take a few steps back. However, he was surrounded by beasts. The divine senses were like a cage that completely surrounded Lin Yi. There was nowhere for him to hide. What a strong divine senses pressure. Back then, Fairy Xuanji only had level 60 divine senses, and she was able to pass through the 10 stages. If she could do it, I can do it too. Thinking about how Fairy Xuanji used level 60 divine senses to take on the 10 stages, Lin Yi gritted his teeth and made up his mind. He managed to resist the divine senses pressure for the time being. In the next moment, Lin Ye's divine senses turned into a light shield that blocked the divine senses pressure. However, on the light shield, small cracks gradually appeared. Obviously, with Lin Ye's current strength, it was very difficult for him to resist the divine sense pressure that came from all directions. In fact, there were many types of trials in the divine will heavenly steel. Even if they were of the same nature, there would be countless forms of expression. The faster you passed, the higher the difficulty the divine will heavenly steel set for you. In addition, there were no fixed trials and everything was random. Sometimes, luck played a large part. As Lin Yi had used the power of the divine inscriptions to pass through the 2 stages quickly, the divine will heavenly steel had tacitly agreed that the following trials would be more difficult for Lin Yi. With the difficulty increased, Lin Yi could not use the divine inscriptions. To him, this was naturally a form of pressure. Roar. The roars became louder and louder. Dozens of beasts had already closed in. In the next moment, the divine senses surged and strengthened the claws of the beasts as they slapped the light shield. Bang! Crack! Crack! In the crisp sound, countless cracks appeared on the light shield. The corner of Lin Ye's mouth twitched, and his expression changed slightly. He could feel that the power of the divine sense contained in those beasts had already exceeded the power he could contend with. Bang! Suddenly, the light shield shattered. The ferocious beasts looked at Lin Yi with eyes full of cruelty. The light shield shattered, and Lin Yi suffered a backlash. He couldn't help but feel his legs go soft, and he fell to the ground, unable to make any counterattack. For a moment, Lin Ye's heart was filled with despair. Whoa! At this moment, a white light flashed and the strange cat, Little Snow, appeared. It flapped its wings and its mouth puffed up. Boom, boom, boom. As he flapped his wings, the surrounding divine consciousness aura gathered. In just an instant, it condensed into a rotating hurricane. The strong waves sent dozens of ferocious beasts flying. Phew! When he saw this, Lin Yi couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief, and then he stared at the strange cat. It just so happens that I can see exactly how strong the strength of the auspicious sign is. Meow! The puffed-up mouth opened, and in the next moment, it was as if a hurricane was spat out from Little Snow's mouth. The strong rotating wind danced, and in an instant, the ferocious beasts in the sky were swept up. Those ferocious beasts roared continuously, and after a while, they burst and turned into divine consciousness aura, dissipating in the air. Lin Yi grinned. Just as he was about to stand up and receive it, he found that the divine consciousness aura gradually dissipated into nothingness. Frowning slightly, Lin Yi quickly understood, and the corner of his mouth twitched. Obviously, the divine consciousness heavenly steel detected that he didn't rely on his own strength to pass this stage, and his reward was cancelled. However, it was fine if it was cancelled. Lin Yi was confident that he could make it into the heaven roll. When the time came to collect the rewards, he would still be able to receive benefits. Whoa! However, Little Snow didn't have any intention of giving up. He suddenly jumped up, and his slightly childish sharp claws waved towards the sky. Bang! A crisp sound rang out. Lin Yi looked up and was extremely surprised. In the previously empty sky, a crack actually appeared under Little Snow's attack. Swoosh! When the crack appeared, a strong pulling force burst out and pulled Lin Yi and the strange cat over. Buzz! Buzz! Amidst the exclamations, Lin Yi had already been pulled into the crack in the space with Little Snow in his arms. The divine consciousness heavenly steel suddenly shook violently. Bang, bang, bang! Crisp sounds rang out continuously, and one by one, figures appeared from the sky and landed on the ground. Ah! Not long after, close to 100 figures fell heavily on the ground, and all of them were in extreme pain. D*Eminent, I'm still trying to pass the stage. Why am I being chased out? Why is it different this time? After I failed, I'm still inside. Could it be that we can only come out after we all fail? In an instant, everyone was extremely curious, and they started to discuss. No, I haven't failed yet, and I've already been chased out. Why is the divine consciousness heavenly steel so strange this time? Everyone was puzzled. Shin Qingyun, Lan Yeheo, and Qing Yu also did not know what was going on. They looked around and were extremely surprised. Where's junior brother Lin? Why hasn't he come out yet? Shin Qingyun quickly realized that Lin Yi had not come out, and her expression turned solemn. She turned to look at the divine consciousness heavenly steel, but she saw that the divine consciousness heavenly steel was shrouded in light and could not be seen clearly. Could it be that there's a change in the divine consciousness heavenly steel? At this time, no matter how slow Lan Yeheo was, he could tell that there was an abnormal change in the divine consciousness heavenly steel, and the reason was Lin Yi. Otherwise, it would not have spat out all of them except for Lin Yi, who was still in the divine consciousness heavenly steel. Phew, I lost the bet this time just like that? Generally speaking, the longer one stayed in the divine consciousness heavenly steel, the higher one's ranking would be. Now that Lan Yeheo had been thrown out, he was naturally in despair. He originally thought that he could suppress Lin Yi, but he did not expect Lin Yi to crush him in terms of cultivation and relationships. Sigh, why isn't there a reward after the trial this time? Could it be that the reward has been cancelled? Don't, if there's no reward, when will I be able to break through to level 61 divine consciousness power? After the rest of the people confirmed that they had been eliminated and did not receive any reward, they all wailed. No, look, the divine consciousness heavenly steel is still operating. That's impossible, right? We've all been thrown out, why is it still operating? Could it be that there's still someone in the divine consciousness heavenly steel? Oh my God, how is that possible? There's no way to fight against that force. How could he still be in the divine consciousness heavenly steel? TSK. The reward hasn't been given, there must be someone in there undergoing the trial. As soon as they finished speaking, the crowd looked at each other, but no one left. They all stared covetously at the divine consciousness heavenly steel. Waiting for the reward was one thing, but they wanted to see who could be so powerful. More than that, they wanted to know what ranking that person could reach in the divine consciousness heavenly steel. End of chapter. Chapter 753. In a strange space, Lin Yi and Auspicious Sign were like two clouds floating in the air. After some time, Lin Yi woke up and realized that his surroundings were filled with divine consciousness. Other than that, there was nothing else. Buzz, buzz, buzz. As if sensing Lin Yi's awakening, the divine consciousness surged and turned into a ball of light, floating in front of Lin Yi. Meow. At this time, Auspicious Sign woke up and pounced on it, swallowing the ball of light into its stomach. The corner of his mouth twitched. Lin Yi was about to teach Auspicious Sign a lesson when he saw another ball of light in the air, shining with a gentle radiance. Frowning, Lin Yi reached out to grab the ball of light, but it was soft as if he had grabbed cotton. After squeezing it a few times, the ball of light followed Lin Yi's skin and entered his body. Wait a minute. This power. As soon as the light rushed into his body, Lin Yi panicked. He quickly immersed his mind and probed the power. However, after probing, Lin Yi's face was solemn. That power was actually similar to the aura of the spiritual will that cultivated the 3,000 heavenly Daos. This power is related to the 3,000 ways of heaven. Lin Yi's pupils shrank as he once again looked at the sea of divine sense aura around him. His breathing quickened. As his strength had not broken through to the great sage realm, Chen Daoxian did not tell him about the 3,000 ways of heaven. He did not expect to find clues in the process of exploring the five spirits' god relic. Lin Yi was sure that this so-called divine consciousness heavenly tablet was related to the 3,000 ways of heaven. Hiss. The divine consciousness in here is really similar to the 3,000 ways of Theta Scarabii. Bilua was awakened by Lin Yi. After scanning the surroundings, she said, Lin Yi, try using the 3,000 ways of heaven. Maybe you can trigger some clues. Alright. Nodding slightly, Lin Yi immediately withdrew the power of his divine sense. With a thought, he dispersed the 3,000 ways of heaven, God Guide, and other cultivation methods and purely circulated the power of the 3,000 ways of heaven. In a split second, the holy power of divine sense rippled and came into contact with the divine sense aura all over the sky. Bang bang bang! Almost at the instant when the two came into contact, all the divine consciousness auras in the space boiled and quickly evaporated, turning into countless clouds. Buzz. Amidst the clouds and mist, a picture appeared. It was a large canyon with verdant trees and a brown earth. It looked rather beautiful. Lin Yi's eyes were like torches, and he quickly engraved that picture in his heart. After a while, the clouds and mist dispersed, and the picture also disappeared. Without the support of his spiritual sense, the space around him began to crumble. Lin Yi felt an excruciating pain all over his body, as if he was about to be swallowed up by an invisible force. Lin Yi gritted his teeth and quickly put the auspicious sign into the ninefold space. In the next moment, his body was swallowed by the cracks that appeared when space collapsed. Cough, cough. When Lin Yi opened his eyes again, he was in front of Director Kong. In the next moment, his body fell rapidly, and he could not help but let out a high-pitched cry. He could not use his power. Feeling the fear of weightlessness, Lin Yi could not help but close his eyes, waiting for the intimate contact with the ground. Bang! He landed heavily on the ground. However, the expected pain was not there. Instead, Lin Yi felt something soft. He could not help but wrap his hands around it, tightly hugging something. Shaking his head violently, Lin Yi raised his eyes to look, but his expression became awkward. The person who appeared in front of him was Shen Qingyun. However, at this moment, he was in Shen Qingyun's arms. His hands were wrapped around Shen Qingyun's neck, like a young girl clinging to her lover. The onlookers were stunned. It seemed like the two of them had flipped. Shen Qingyun's height did not even reach Lin Yi's chest. At this moment, she was hugging Lin Yi like this. It was too much of a scene. For a moment, the onlookers were watching with great interest. Only Lan Yeheo was in a daze. He looked like he had nothing left to live for. That delicate and tender heart of a young man, after it was shattered, it was crushed into dregs. Cough, cough. Coughing awkwardly, Lin Yi looked around and realized that everyone's eyes were on him and Shen Qingyun. He was embarrassed and said helplessly, "Senior Sister Shen, I don't know what happened. I was suddenly chased out by the divine will, divine steel." Then why aren't you coming down?" Glaring fiercely at Lin Yi, Shen Qingyun pouted but did not personally pull Lin Yi down. She could feel that the energy in Lin Yi's body was depleted for some reason and could not be used. She was worried that she would use too much force and hurt Lin Yi. Cough, cough, come down now. Hearing this, Lin Yi finally reacted. He quickly let go of his hands and jumped down. Looking around, Lin Yi looked at the divine will, divine steel. Seeing that the light on the divine will, divine steel was fading, his expression changed. "Junior brother Lin, what happened just now?" Shen Qingyun asked curiously. "Just now we were suddenly thrown out. Not long after, you were also thrown out. Did you fail the trial? Or what happened?" Lan Yeheo grinned and said, "Yeah, I was still trying and was thrown out. Otherwise, I wouldn't have come out later than you." Lin Yi glanced at Lan Yeheo and knew that he was unconvinced. He shook his head slightly and didn't say anything as he continued to stare at the spiritual will, heavenly steel. "TSK. I've obtained the clue to the 3,000 heavenly Tao. Will the divine will, heavenly steel be destroyed just like that?" Rubbing his nose, this thought suddenly flashed through Lin Yi's mind, and he couldn't help but feel extremely regretful. The trial of the spiritual will sky steel was quite beneficial to one's cultivation. If possible, he would like to continue training in it for a period of time. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Suddenly, the divine will heavenly steel trembled, and the light on it completely dissipated. Countless wisps of divine sense sprang into the sky and poured down onto the crowd like raindrop. Buzz. In an instant, everyone in the field was enveloped by the aura of divine consciousness. The divine consciousness in their bodies surged, and their strength rose at an extremely fast speed. Only Shen Qingyun wasn't enveloped by the aura of divine consciousness. Looking at Lin Yi, who was cultivating with his eyes closed, Shen Qingyun smiled and sat down cross-legged. She cupped her face and stared at Lin Yi, her cheeks gradually turning red. The aura of divine consciousness lingered for a full hour before it dissipated. Soon, the crowd cheered. Almost every one of them had a huge improvement. Qing Yu's divine consciousness had risen to the peak of level 60 and was only a step away from level 61. However, Lin Yi wasn't very happy. This time, his divine consciousness had only broken through to level 61. Although the improvement was huge, it wasn't as dazzling as Fairy Xuanji's. The aura of divine consciousness dissipated. On the steel, light flickered and the heaven list changed again. In an instant, the cheering crowd stopped talking and turned to look at the divine will heavenly steel. Their eyes were filled with excitement. End of chapter. Chapter 754. Boom! The divine will heaven ranking suddenly emitted a red light. In the next moment, the top 20 became illusory. A brand new name appeared, pushing down the rest of the rankings by one place. Other than that, there was no other movement. The divine will heaven steel's light dissipated and turned into a black stone steel again. It looked quite normal. Lin Yi. Number 17, Lin Yi. SSS. Lin Yi is the last person to appear? In an instant, everyone turned around and their gazes fell on Lin Yi. Not only them, but Lan Yeheo was also stunned. Originally, he was still unconvinced that he came out early. He thought that if the divine will heaven steel did not make a mistake, Lin Yi would definitely not last as long as him. But now, Lin Yi directly charged into the top 20. Lan Yeheo was completely convinced. The top 50 of the divine will heaven ranking could not be ranked based on time. One had to pass two extremely difficult checkpoints. Lan Yeheo had also tried before, but he failed miserably. Therefore, seeing that Lin Yi charged into the top 20, he was completely convinced and willingly admitted defeat. Hee junior brother Lin, you're really amazing. Shin Qingyun jumped in front of Lin Yi and said with a smile, looks like you can protect me this time. Oh right, where's little snow? Hurry up and let it out. Glancing at Shin Qingyun, Lin Yi called little snow out and let it play with Shin Qingyun while he walked towards Lan Yeheo. Brother, I know what you want to say. Without waiting for Lin Yi to speak, Lan Yeheo stretched out his hand and sighed. Don't worry, I won't disturb junior sister Shin in the future. As for the bet, this stalk of blood soul flower is yours. Although your divine will power is quite strong, your martial cultivation still needs to be improved. I hope the blood soul flower can help you. With that, Lan Yeheo threw the blood soul flower to Lin Yi and turned to leave. Looking at his back as he left, it was rather bleak. Rubbing his nose, Lin Yi was flabbergasted. His goal was not to let Lan Yeheo leave, nor was it because of the bet. Instead, he wanted to ask him about the 5 spirit god remnants. But if Lan Yeheo wanted to leave, he would not stop him. After all, Shin Qingyun did not like Lan Yeheo. He did not want Shin Qingyun to be too restrained. After Lan Yeheo left, Lin Yi glanced at his surroundings and found that the others were looking at him strangely. He couldn't help but tremble. At the same time, the spectators, especially the disciples of the various powers in the desolate god realm, all wanted to form a relationship with Lin Yi. Lin Yi's talent shocked them. They already understood that Lin Yi must have come from the 4 major domains. If they could form a relationship with him, the families behind them would be able to receive support. Even if he did not come from the 4 major domains, with the talent that Lin Yi had displayed, they were willing to get close to him. If they could pull Lin Yi into their family, when Lin Yi grew up, wouldn't he be able to kill everyone? Therefore, with this thought in mind, almost everyone was quietly approaching Lin Yi. This was especially true for some of the more beautiful girls who were tugging at their clothes appropriately. Rolling his eyes, Lin Yi had an ominous premonition in his heart. He hurriedly pulled Shin Qingyun, wanting to leave this place. However, before he could open his mouth, an ayah sound was heard, and a young girl's cry of surprise rang out. In the next moment, Lin Yi felt a heat on his back, and his waist was tightly hugged by someone. The corner of Lin Yi's mouth twitched. He was actually being forcefully hugged by a woman? I'm sorry. Before Lin Yi could get angry, the young girl let go of her hand and said in a gentle voice, Sir, are you all right? At this moment, Shin Qingyun also realized that something was wrong. She turned her head slightly and saw that it was a young girl who was so close to Lin Yi. She immediately pouted and stared at her. Damn you, little demon girl. You're so slutty. You went up just like that? Humph, you want to rope him in front of us? How can we let you off so easily? The rest of the people sighed but did not leave. They continued to approach Lin Yi. Even if they could not get close to Lin Yi, they could not let others get close to him. Lin Yi turned around and glanced at the young girl. He said indifferently, "If you want to scam me, then there's a problem." Ha ha. Hearing this, the young girl laughed softly. "Sir, you're so humorous. If I were to scam you, what would happen?" "Nothing. I'll beat you to death." Lin Yi looked indifferent. Shin Qingyun couldn't help but laugh out loud. She was not the only one. Everyone who thought that Lin Yi would be bewitched by the little demon girl also laughed. "You?" The young girl's mouth twitched. She looked at Lin Yi with eyes full of surprise. For so many years, other men who did not like her or fawn over her would at least pay attention to her and be attracted by her looks. However, she could clearly see that Lin Ye's eyes did not have the slightest bit of emotion as he looked at her. It was as if she was not a person. "You rascal, don't you know how to be gentle with a girl?" Gritting her teeth, the young girl glanced at Shin Qingyun and suddenly laughed. "Sir, you like someone by your side, so. However, she's still a little girl. She can't satisfy you." Hearing this, Shin Qingyun's face darkened. Lin Ye's face also darkened. He said coldly, "If you say any more nonsense, I'll kill you." As soon as he finished speaking, a biting cold sword essence rose and filled the surroundings of the spiritual will sky steel. In an instant, everyone present felt a strong killing intent and the cold sword chi. It was as if many invisible sharp blades were piercing their bodies and could take their lives at any time. At this time, the geniuses of the four major sects had not arrived. Even if there were geniuses from the other four major domains, most of them were below the great sage. They could not withstand Lin Ye's sword essence. His sword territory had broken through the shackles of the territory. The power of his sword essence was extremely shocking. The sound of people swallowing their saliva was heard. The young girl's face was also pale, and she did not dare to speak. At this time, the young girl was filled with regret. If she had known that Lin Yi cared so much about Shin Qingyun, she would not have made such a joke. Not only would she not be able to get closer to Lin Yi, but she would also make a fool of herself. It was even possible that Lin Yi would kill her. Humph! Lin Yi glanced coldly at the crowd. As Shin Qingyun smiled brightly and happily, he pulled her away. Qingyue sighed faintly. She was very tired. If she could choose again, she would definitely choose to follow Fairy Xuanji. Lin Yi and Shin Qingyun simply ignored her and did not treat her as a human. After Lin Yi left, the sword chi that filled the air finally dissipated. Everyone relaxed and let out a long sigh of relief. Hiss, who is that person? He's so powerful. I guess the geniuses of the four major domains are not as good as him. End of chapter. Chapter 755. In Cloud Sand City, Lin Yi and the other two strolled along the street. After leaving the divine will heavenly steel, Lin Yi did not plan to leave. Instead, he wanted to search for information about the Five Spirits God relic while waiting for Fairy Xuanji and the rest to arrive. Of course, Lin Yi had another plan. Lin Yi had obtained a map from the divine will heavenly steel, but he did not know where the canyon on the map was. Therefore, Lin Yi wanted to find out more about the canyon. Although the Cloud Sand City was a small city, Lin Yi understood from Shin Qingyun's words that geniuses from the four regions would often come here to train. Perhaps there might really be someone who knew about the canyon. In addition, Shin Qingyun wanted to continue playing, so the three of them decided to wander around Cloud Sand City. They would enter almost all the shops to take a look. Lin Yi even asked a few people about the canyon, but to no avail. 2 hours later, the sky gradually darkened. Lin Yi and the other two found an inn to stay in. After ordering food, Lin Yi was about to head upstairs when he heard a soft sound coming from downstairs. "Are you sure that there is that thing in the cold abyss canyon?" "Of course, I went to check it out a few times." Hearing this, Lin Yi raised his eyebrows and stopped in his tracks. "Canyon, that thing? Shoo, lower your voice." However, just as Lin Yi was about to continue listening, the sound stopped abruptly. Lin Yi rolled his eyes and couldn't help but have doubts in his heart. Could the cold abyss canyon that the two of them mentioned be the clue from the divine will heavenly steel? However, Lin Yi had a bad feeling about this. He had just started searching for information about the canyon, and someone had delivered it to him. Was this not too much of a coincidence? Perhaps it was a trap for him? Phew! This is my first time here, so no one should know me. Could it be that those people or that woman just now have a grudge against me and want to deal with me? That's not right. If it's them, how could they know that I'm looking for the canyon? There must be something fishy about this. I have to go and find out more about this. Rolling his eyes, Lin Yi immediately made up his mind. Whether it was a trap or not, he had to go down and check it out. However, when Lin Yi went down, he only saw two figures sneaking into the backyard and quickly disappearing from his sight. This made Lin Yi frown. In the restaurant, he could get close to the two people, but now they had gone to the backyard. If Lin Yi followed them, he would be easily discovered. With a sigh, Lin Yi could only suppress the doubts in his heart and return upstairs. At this moment, the waiter had already brought the food over. Shin Qingyun and Qing Yu had been busy for a long time. When they saw the delicacies, they also felt hungry, so they cleaned them up like a whirlwind sweeping away clouds. However, Lin Yi was absent-minded. He kept thinking about the two figures. The 3,000 heavenly Tao was very important to him. Therefore, even if there was a slight possibility, Lin Yi wanted to investigate it. After eating, Shin Qingyun and Qing Yu quickly noticed Lin Ye's abnormality and asked curiously, "When I went upstairs just now, I heard the two of them talking about the cold abyss canyon. They were so sneaky. I'm wondering if the cold abyss canyon is the place I'm looking for." Lin Yi glanced at Shin Qingyun and said in a low voice, "Senior Sister Shin, are you sure there's no canyon around here? There isn't one in my memory." Shin Qingyun bit her lip and said in a low voice, "But I'm only familiar with 4 of the 7 cities. I'm not familiar with the other 3 and the surroundings. Perhaps the so-called Frigid Depths Valley is in the vicinity of those 3 cities. If that's the case, perhaps the Cold Abyss Canyon is the place I'm looking for." Lin Ye's eyes turned cold. Normally, the place where the clue was given would not be too far away from the clue. Therefore, Lin Yi suspected that the Cold Abyss Canyon was the place he was looking for. If that's the case, let's go to the other 3 cities tomorrow. Nodding slightly, Lin Yi had already made up his mind. Shin Qingyun was very supportive of this decision. To her, going to a new city meant that she could play for a few more days. Qing Yu had no choice but to follow Lin Yi and Shin Qingyun. After making up his mind, Lin Yi packed up his things and left the room to let the 2 girls rest. Back in his room, Lin Yi was just about to cultivate when he heard a sound outside the window. His hand movements paused. Lin Yi narrowed his eyes and spread out his divine sense. He discovered that 2 sneaky figures were communicating with a few people in the backyard. Their voices were extremely weak, but he could vaguely hear the names Cold Abyss, Canyon, Tai Mountain, Ice Feather, and so on. After a while, the 2 figures sent the others away and returned to the restaurant as if they were looking for something. Lin Yi frowned slightly. After pondering for a moment, he suddenly got up and left the room. When he went downstairs, the servants had not finished their work and were still in the hall. "Young master, is there anything we can help you with?" Seeing Lin Yi coming downstairs, the servants quickly went up to him. After pondering for a moment, Lin Yi looked around and found that the 2 sneaky people were not in the hall. He turned around and asked, "Do you know where the Cold Abyss Canyon is?" "Cold Abyss Canyon?" Hearing this, the servants were stunned. They smiled and said, "Young master, We've lived in Cloud Sand City for decades, but we've never heard of the cold Abyss Canyon. Yes, young master, you must have remembered wrongly. There's no cold Abyss Canyon. Narrowing his eyes, Lin Yi suddenly thought of Tai Mountain. He quickly asked, "Do you know Tai Mountain?" "Tai Mountain, we definitely know." The servant replied, "Tai Mountain is around Crimson Phoenix City. However, there are many arrays on Tai Mountain, and it's quite dangerous. It's said that a heavenly saint had died there, but no one has ever found it." Crimson Phoenix City, Tai Mountain. Hearing this, Lin Ye's lips curled up. He confirmed what the servant said. It seemed that not many people knew about the cold Abyss Canyon. However, as long as he found Tai Mountain and understood what Ice Feather meant, he would be able to find the entrance to the cold Abyss Canyon. "Thank you, everyone. This is your reward." After understanding the connection, Lin Yi was in a good mood. He raised his hand and threw out tens of thousands of saint stones, then turned around and returned to his room. "Saint stones! Mine. They're all mine." At first, the servants did not care, but when they realized that Lin Yi had casually thrown out the holy stone, they immediately went crazy. To them, tens of thousands of saint stones were enough to do many things. However, none of them realized that in the corner of the hall, there were two figures staring at them. Looking at each other, the two of them revealed a sinister smile, as if their scheme had succeeded. End of chapter. Chapter 756. It was a quiet night. The next day, when Lin Yi finished his cultivation, the sun was already high in the sky. Lin Yi walked out of his room. The bustling hall was now extremely quiet. Lin Yi scanned the hall with his divine thought and went downstairs. Sure enough, Shen Qinyun and Qinyue, the two girls, had long prepared food and were waiting for Lin Yi to come down. The rest of the people looked at Shen Qinyun and Qinyue from time to time. They didn't even dare to speak loudly. After eating, Lin Yi immediately left with the two girls and rushed to Crimson Phoenix City. Although Shen Qinyun didn't know about the cold Abyss Canyon, she knew the specific locations of the 7 cities very well. Crimson Phoenix City was not considered weak among the 7 cities. Its strength was not much weaker than that of Cloud Sand City. However, there was no divine will heavenly steel in the city, and there was nothing fun to do there. Moreover, it was at the border, close to the abysmal heavenly region. Therefore, not many people were willing to come here. When Lin Yi and the two girls arrived at Crimson Phoenix City, there were not many people on the street. Even many of the shops were closed. "Why is this place so desolate?" Lin Yi frowned slightly. He was very curious. He felt that there was a secret hidden in Crimson Phoenix City. After quickly finding a restaurant and booking a room, Lin Yi asked the servant about the cold Abyss Canyon. However, as before, no one knew about the cold Abyss Canyon. As for Mount Tai, there was a lot of information. However, when it came to the road to Taishan Mountain, no one could tell the reason why. In the end, a servant could only remind him, "Sir, if you really want to go to Mount Tai, you'd better buy a map. There are countless arrays on Mount Tai. Without a map, you can only force your way through. However, even heavenly saints have fallen on Mount Tai. Therefore, it's best to buy a map." After being reminded, Lin Yi quickly thanked the servant and led Shen Qinyun and Qinyue out of the restaurant to look for a shop that sold map. However, there were very few people in Crimson Phoenix City, and there were even fewer shops. Lin Yi finally found a general store that sold map. After he mentioned Mount Tai, the store owner, who was full of smiles, immediately chased Lin Yi out. This also made Lin Yi realize how dangerous Mount Tai was. However, the more dangerous it was, the more Lin Yi wanted to investigate. If the map in the Divine Will Heavenly Steel was really the frigid Abyss Canyon, then he could continue to cultivate the second volume of the 3,000 Heavenly Ways. Just the first volume of the 3,000 Heavenly Daos allowed him to possess such a powerful divine sense. If he were to successfully cultivate the second volume, his strength would probably increase at a terrifying speed. Therefore, Lin Yi could only continue to look for shops in the city to buy the map of Taishan Mountain. Of course, if there really wasn't a map for sale in a city, then they would have to go without a map. As the 3 disciples of Sibu Gakuen, if they couldn't even pass through Mount Tai, then they would really lose face. After an hour, just as Lin Yi was about to give up looking for a shop, Lin Yi and the other 2 saw an old and simple shop. There was a worn-out plaque hanging on the door with the words, "Ancient Map," written on it. After taking a closer look at the shop, Lin Yi was slightly surprised. Although this shop was slightly worn out, it had a unique charm. For a moment, Lin Yi couldn't help but be curious about this shop. He slowly walked into the shop and looked around. The interior wasn't very spacious, and there were sunstones on the walls that emitted light, illuminating the shop. There were many maps on the shelves, but it was extremely deserted. The other shops still had some customers, but this shop, other than Lin Yi and the other 2, was empty. Even some of the maps on the shelves were covered in dust. Obviously, this shop wasn't just deserted today. After taking a closer look, Lin Ye's gaze finally stopped on an old man behind the counter who was carefully making maps with his head down. The old man wasn't young. His hair was white, and his palms seemed to be dried up. However, the strength he used when drawing the map was steady and powerful, which surprised Lin Yi. He was sure that the old man's cultivation was definitely not weak. "Junior brother Lin, this shop," Shin Qingyun waved her hand in disgust. Just as she was about to speak, Lin Yi stopped her. Seeing this, Shin Qingyun blinked her eyes, but still chose to stand quietly beside Lin Yi. The old man seemed to have not heard Shin Qingyun's words and continued making maps with his head down. This time, not only was Lin Yi curious about him, but Shin Qingyun and Qin Yu were also curious and looked at the old man with interest. Normally, when a shop owner heard someone talking, he would put down what he was doing and come over to greet the customer. However, the old man didn't care at all. This kind of attitude didn't seem like a shop owner. Seeing that the old man still needed some time to finish his drawing, Lin Yi turned around and began to flip through the maps on the shelf. Since this was a shop, all the maps could be sold. Naturally, he could flip through them. After casually flipping through them a few times, Lin Yi was surprised. These maps were very detailed. Not only did they have the route of Mount Tai, but they also had the distribution of spiritual beasts and the distribution of formations. In the distribution of demonic beasts, the hunting areas and resting areas of demonic beasts of different ranks were also divided in detail. This old man's strength is definitely not weak. Seeing these maps, Lin Ye's heart couldn't help but tremble. To be able to make such maps, this old man must be able to move freely in Mount Tai. Shin Qingyun and Qin Yu were shocked and quickly covered their mouth. When they looked at the old man again, their eyes were filled with surprise. Obviously, they still didn't dare to believe that the old man had such strength. After putting away the map, Lin Yi walked towards the other bookshelves. These maps were also incomparably detailed. They included the 7 cities and the entire desolate god realm. It could be said that they were all-inclusive. Narrowing his eyes, just as Lin Yi was considering how to get along with the old man, his hands moved slightly to the side. The map in his hands split open and a slightly tattered map fell out. Lin Yi bent down to pick it up. Glancing at it from the corner of his eye, it was as if he had been struck by lightning. His entire body froze on the spot. Lin Ye's palm trembled slightly. Even his heart was beating violently. Taking a deep breath, Lin Yi forcefully suppressed the throbbing in his heart. He gripped the broken map tightly and carefully sized it up. On the broken map, there was a canyon. It was exactly the same as the one that appeared in the Divine Will Heavenly Steel. "It really is it." Unconcealable joy immediately filled Lin Ye's eyes. He didn't expect that the clue he wanted to find would actually be found in this small shop. End of this chapter. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.